How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
Eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital.
That's difficult to answer.
weil der Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum braucht er was zum Essen, bitte sehr. Es macht ihn ein Geschwätz nicht satt, das schafft kein Essen her.
Drum links, 2, 3, drum links, 2, 3, wo dein Platz genossen ist, weil dich ein Genialwalter einheizt und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Und weil der Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum hat der Stiefel im Gesicht nicht gern. Er will unter sich keinen Sklaven sehen und über sich keinen Herrn.
Drum links, 2, 3, drum links, 2, 3, wo dein Platz genossen ist, weil dich ein Genialwalter einheizt und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Und weil der Prolet ein Prolet ist, drum wird ihn kein anderer befreien. Es kann die Befreiung der Arbeiter nur das Werk der Arbeiter sein.
Drum links, 2, 3, drum links, 2, 3, wo dein Platz genossen ist, weil dich ein Genialwalter einheizt und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Oh, Здравствуйте, comrades! Здравствуйте, comrades! You know what I just realized? I can actually turn my microphone thing off now. Hang on one. You couldn't hear me, and now you can. And now you can. Well. We're back. It muted me when it switched over my microphone, okay? We're back. You guys can hear me, right? I hope you can hear me because we have a very... Actually, shit, I do need to turn it back on. Oh no, hang on. We have a very special episode, and I just realized I actually do still need the microphone thing on. Hang on, one sec. Boom. See, I'm a professional. I am a professional. All right, the microphone thing is set back up again. I am a professional, and I always have it together, but maybe not after I've been undercover in an event for 4 days. Maybe not after I've spent the last 4 days straight watching some of the most insane, unhinged leftist content that I have ever seen in my life. I know I haven't been streaming this week, except I've been doing a ton of spy streams, and we literally just finished watching 4 days of the conference for the Institute for Research into Male Supremacism. And I'm going to show you this event. And we're going to talk a lot about this event tonight, and we're going to watch a highlight reel, and it is an epic highlight reel, and it's not even a highlight reel of the whole conference, because literally like 15 minutes ago, I just got done 15 minutes ago. Now, you might say, Karlyn, how are you undercover at something? You're sitting in your office. And that is very true. I may be using the word undercover a little colloquially because it was an entirely virtual event. So I didn't have to get on a plane. I didn't have to wear a disguise. I didn't have to dye my hair. I didn't have to wear a chest binder. That was pretty great. Things I've all done undercover before. But I am calling it Undercover because listen, man, we just had to sit through 4 effing days of these conference presentations, and we watched the whole thing from start to finish. I've got the pre-conference workshops on video. I've got day 1, day 2, day 3, and we just finished up. Maybe this is day 3? I don't even know. We've been doing this since what? Wednesday? So yeah, this is day 4 of this conference. So anyway, yeah, so is it technically like not like in-person Undercover? Yeah, fine. But I still had to be in a leftist environment for the past several days. So you know what? I'm taking the W on that one because I feel as though I've earned it. I feel as though I've earned it. That's just the reality that we live in, man. Not everything happens in person. But let me show you what we've been doing. And we've got a very special surprise coming up starting at 6 p.m. tonight. So we've got a little time for it. We have, for the last 4 days, been undercover at the Institute for Research into Male Supremacism. Now, I would love to know who in the chat has been spy streaming with me. Who in the chat? Press 1 in the chat if you watched any of the spy streams that we've done around this. Press 2 in the chat if this is just like you just showed up and you don't even really know what's going on. So the Institute for Research on Male Supremacism is an organization that I've been paying attention to probably for at least 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years, something like that. So this is one of those organizations that is funded by, part of the reason I wanted to do this organization is funded by the University of California, Berkeley. This event that we went undercover at is literally funded by the University of California, Berkeley. And I can prove that because it's on their website. So we are on their website right now. 2025 conference. We've got their schedule on here. This is funded by the Berkeley Center for Right-Wing Studies. And, you know, one of the things that I have to say that's been really kind of alarming to me over the past 4 days is the left is studying us. This is what it feels like. And you guys will understand this. The left has I didn't realize the extent of this before this conference. The left has maybe dozens, maybe hundreds of people out there that are just studying the right from an academic level. They are studying the right-wing ecosphere. Now, they have a lot of crazy ideas about it, and they don't get a lot right, to be honest. They don't actually understand what they're looking at. But just really think about this. Through the university system, the left has developed an entire network of people that their entire job is to study us. Everything about us. Everything about our beliefs, everything about our online communities. And when I say I mean people on the right. They study all these different subsets. There was tons of talk of incels. There was talk of the manosphere, obviously, but there was also just talk about the MAGA movement. There was talk about the Maha movement. There was talk about the pro-life movement. There was talk about the Christians. There was talk about all these different subcultures within the right that they're all studying and picking apart. And who is doing this on our side? Oh, me? No one else is really doing this on our side that I know of. And if you guys know of other people doing this, I'm not talking about think tanks like the Heritage Foundation, where they are putting together political policy. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about like City Journal and Chris Rufo and the Manhattan Institute, where they are pushing a political narrative. It's a narrative. This is not what they're doing. They are studying us. From like a detached perspective. There's no one doing this on our side. They write papers about this. This was an entire conference about studying the right and exchanging ideas about the right. They've studied people's profile pictures. They've studied memes. And it's silly when you see it, and you guys are going to see a lot of crazy shit tonight. I promise you that. But it was so striking to me how these people were studying us. And we're going to be talking a lot about that. I learned a lot at this conference about how the left perceives the right and how they're going about understanding what their enemy is doing. And you know what? I don't even feel bad about infiltrating them. Of course, I wouldn't feel bad about it anyway. But the fact of the matter is, I watched session after session after session after session after session after session at this conference where they talked about going to right-leaning events to study them, where they talked about going into right-leaning spaces to study them. So they are doing to us at a massive scale what I am trying to do for them. We're not talking about Red May right now. We're talking about something else. So I don't know what to say, guys. Like, I don't know how, even as misguided as they are, and they are very and deeply misguided in many, 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 many things, at least they're doing it, is the thing. At least they're doing it. So this is what we've been sitting in for the past 3 days, and we've got a very special little surprise coming up at 6 p.m., and then we're going to watch a highlight reel a little bit later. This is what we've been sitting in. Let me get you the full schedule here so I can talk to you guys about some of the sessions that we watched. And I have this entire thing on video. Almost every single session I watched live. There were a few that I missed, but I don't think they're going to be that great anyway. It doesn't matter. I have so much footage. I have 24 hours, maybe even more. I have probably near 30 hours of footage from this conference over the past 4 days. That's how insane I've gone. So the pre-conference workshop, interrogating the role of male supremacism and the issues of indoctrination in online communities. Second workshop, the politics of culture, reflections on the societal effects of misogyny, anti-feminism, and male supremacism. They've taken all their title. Wait, did they take all the titles out? No, they're back here. Okay, so that was pre-conference. Day 1. Influencers and entrepreneurs paving the way to radicalization. Anti-feminist influencers in Argentina, the backlash to the arrival of Milei. The radicalization process inside the manosphere. New gen misogynistic incels and critical looks theory. This is talking about looks maxing. Male supremacism in the Indian manosphere. That presentation was hilarious. We've got biological essentialism and supremacist views of race, sexuality, and gender. They did a presentation called It's Just Biology, the Role of Silence in Male Supremacy. Detransitioning through the cis hetero patriarchal lens. That's a trip right there. That person is a trip. Beyond race and ethnicity, male supremacists of color and the appeal of white supremacy. They've got the relationship between gender equity and democracy and authoritarianism. From this you're going to watch this full presentation tonight. This presentation is hilarious. From NoFap to anti-porn, how far-right sexual ideology went mainstream. The intersections of democratic backsliding and abortion law, gender and the multiracial right. We've got, this was another crazy presentation, male supremacy and anti-government sentiment among U.S. youth, transforming militarized masculinities by challenging gender-exploitive marketing and weapons of war. Mixed, unclear, and unstable, identifying ideological cross-pollination within the alt-right and anti-feminist extremist platforms. From forums to violence, incel ideology, and extreme misogyny. This is just one day, guys. This is one day. We watched all of these. I mean, it just keeps going and going and going and going and going. Let's see. Let's see some good ones for day 2. Mapping the manosphere and understanding network communities. The Italian manosphere between traditional sexism and new strategies. The manosphere conceptualizing anti-feminist network publics. Mapping the neo-manosphere. Let's see. Let me find some good ones. Politicizing the male engagement movement. That was actually an interesting one. The male supremacist playbook, fueling the backlash to gender equality and what to do about it. A nuanced approach to understanding harm within the misogynist incel forums. Mapping the journey towards misogynist incel ideology. I have all of this on video. Incels in Austria. Oh, this one was funny. Trying to talk white teenage boys off the alt-right ledge and other impacts on masculine influencers on teachers. I think we're going to watch this full presentation tonight. This was specifically about how the manosphere is making life more difficult for teachers in school. You guys are not going to believe the clip reel I have for you tonight. You just wait. It is amazing. I'm not super familiar with children's ecosystems online, expert assessments of the effects of early childhood and adolescent exposure to extremism online. They got all sorts of stuff. There was a ton of studies on incel.is. They talked about that. Oh my God. You guys, this is one of the last things in the clip reel today. This presentation was insanity. Posthuman feminism and the boundaries of male supremacism. Let me give you a too long didn't read of what that presentation was about. If you believe that human beings are superior to other species on this planet, then you are a white supremacist and a male supremacist. I swear to God, this is the argument that presentation made. You're going to see it tonight in the clip reel. If you believe that human beings are above all other species on the planet, then you are a white supremacist and a male supremacist, and you're supporting supremacy, and you're a fascist. I swear to God, you're going to see it tonight. If you don't believe, if you think I'm making that up, you're not going to think I'm making it up after tonight. You're going to see it. You're going to see it. It's not live, but you're going to see the whole video of it. It's in the entire, yeah, it's like crazy. Let's see. Day 3. This one was funny because this person basically went to an airport in China that had a male-only checkout security lane, and she wrote a whole fucking paper about it. I was like, what are you even doing? The right to rage, provocation, defense, male supremacism, and right-wing populist backlash, exploring men's perspectives on making misogyny a hate crime. This presentation is amazing. You're not going to see this one tonight because it just happened today. Uncle Sam Wants You, Anti-Femininity, Universal Nationalism, and the Gay Right. That presentation is next level insanity. And then this entire session, guys, how do male supremacist communities present themselves? Trans, maxing, nofap, and more. Every single session in this was fucking hilarious. Members in good standing, the relationship between pornography reboot communities and the manosphere, queering the manosphere, how trans maxing relates to and complicates our understandings of male supremacism. We are not misogynistic, we're just nostalgic. I mean, it just keeps going and going and going and going and going. But tonight I have a very special surprise. Tonight we're going to do something extra special because the conference is still going right now. And the very last session of the conference, the speech by the founder of the organization is about to start in 6 minutes. And even though I'm streaming live on the internet right now, the fact of the matter is they don't know what name I'm signed up as under this conference. Because I obviously don't use my real name to sign up for this shit. So what we're going to do, and we're just going to see how this works out. And if it doesn't work out, that's fine. If they find out, Alex, that I'm streaming their conference on the internet, that's fine. They can try to kick me out. They can try to cancel their session. And it doesn't even matter because I have the entire rest of the conference on video. Okay. And I'm going to be dropping so many clips over. It's going to take weeks. It will take literally weeks to drop every single clip I have from this conference. Don't let the highlight reel fool you. I put that highlight, it's a 2-hour highlight. I have a 2-hour highlight reel today. That's not even the full conference. But I put that together quickly last night to have something to show you guys today. But like, there's so much more than I even put in that highlight reel. And that was only for the first couple days of the conference, okay? So you aren't even on tonight's stream, you aren't even going to see the stuff we saw today. And the stuff we saw today is insane, but I haven't had a chance to edit it yet because we literally just got done. So how about we sign in for that conference, shall we? How about we sign in for that last event? We're going to watch the last speech until it either ends or they kick us out or they end up quitting, whichever comes first, Alex. Alex is the name of the woman who runs this. And then after we get done with watching their last speech live, we're going to watch the clip reel together. And that is going to be our Socialism Saturday for tonight. I hope you guys appreciate it. And I hope you guys enjoy this as much as I did. We had a great time infiltrating this conference. It was hilarious. It was both terrifying and hilarious and insanity at the same time. And I might be going crazy because I've been watching this stuff for 4 straight days, and that'll do it to you after a while. But it's the best thing I've ever infiltrated. It's the best thing I've ever recorded. I'm so excited for you guys to see it. You guys are going to have a ton of fun. And but let's get into the session, shall we? Let's get into their session. The last one of the day. And let's just see. Let's just see. Okay, everyone. Shh.
Recording in progress.
we're just going to chill out here for a second, guys. We do have a couple more minutes before they get started. So mount the like button, guys. Welcome to Socialism Saturday, impromptu Socialism Saturday. Not impromptu Socialism Saturdays, every Saturday at 6 p.m. But guys, please make sure you mount the like button. Please make sure you're sharing stuff out. While we're kind of like in a holding pattern, please make sure that you are sharing the post that I just put on Twitter. Please make sure you're sharing it, and it's pinned to the top. And I know a bunch of people have been sharing it already. And that post actually has the highlight reel in it that we're gonna watch tonight. But don't watch it yet. We're gonna watch it together. That's just for later, if you feel like it. But you don't have to watch it yet. You can just watch it now with us, and it's gonna be more fun with us. Man, it was a crazy guys. You guys are not going to believe all the clips too. We've got a really long, so I put up a really long highlight reel on my Substack, on my Twitter, and all that stuff. I am going to be making much shorter clips of everything, but I can only do so many things at once when I'm also spending 4 days watching a conference. So I do know you guys will be patient with me getting that up, but we will start dropping clips on Monday. And of course, we'll be dropping them first on the Substack. That is Karlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. We have several spy streams coming up over the next couple of weeks. So if you guys want to go inside other leftist events with me, make sure you sign up as a supporter on the Substack. That's who's allowed to come to spy stream, is people who are supporting my work on Substack, locals, Patreon, Twitter subscribers, YouTube channel members. And so you guys can come and support all these events with me. Oh man, they're crazy. This is a crazy event. We're just in a little bit of a holding pattern, guys. Hang on. Okay. Yes, I will be sharing. Well, I'm not going to share the full stream. The full stream is Spy Stream, but I will be sharing clips of that. I've already shared one clip of that. I'm going to be sharing more this week.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Alex DeBranco, the Executive Director and co-founder of the Institute for Research on Male Supremacism. I'm just going to make some brief remarks tonight about the state of research on male supremacism and a little about the programs we have at IRMS. If anyone has questions at any time or topics around male supremacism or IRMS or programs or the conference that you would like to hear more about, please feel free to put them in the chat at any time. After I've spoken tonight, we'll go into our final networking and social hour. I want to begin by thanking everyone who has joined us for the conference, especially our presenters, and also our co-sponsors, the Berkeley Center for Right-Wing Studies and Western State Center. So, the Institute for Research on Male Supremacism has been in existence for a little over 5 years now, as of this past fall. It was founded in 2019, in large part out of frustration that male supremacism and misogyny were largely not being taken seriously in academia or independent research organizations, and that there were widespread misunderstandings of this ideology. Much of the Institute's focus was simply raising understanding of male supremacism and its significance. Our use of this terminology, male supremacist, was part of this aim, positioning this in the same conceptual realm as white supremacist ideology. At our 5-year anniversary, we reviewed the changing situation and found that while the concept of male supremacism is now far more widespread and it is taken more seriously, there are still very deep misunderstandings of this ideology. Our focus has thus shifted from awareness to more deeply correcting these misunderstandings and deepening the understanding of male supremacism and its intersections. In a forthcoming white paper that is a collaboration among multiple members of our institute from various countries, we identify dehumanization and entitlement as the fundamental aspects of supremacist ideologies. The combination of dehumanization and entitlement creates supremacist ideologies which are anti-consent, reject bodily autonomy, and justify or idolize violence. In male supremacism, this can be seen in abortion criminalization, sexual violence, denial of trans health care, among other violations. A key barrier we have found to the accurate research and analysis in this area is sympathy. Kate Mann's term for the excessive sympathy given to cisgender men, even when perpetrating misogyny and violence, which shapes even the scholarly research community. As an interdisciplinary, intersectional feminist organization comprised of majority women, trans, and non-binary researchers, we are uniquely positioned to recognize and critique this harmful tendency. IRMS also recognizes the need for historically and culturally informed prevention strategies to change male supremacist systems and society for the long term, and as such have looked to anti-supremacist and anti-authoritarian prevention strategies in early childhood education, from consent-based comprehensive sexuality education to drag story hour readings and entertainment media. These are key areas where people can learn to humanize and respect others, value consent and bodily autonomy, and develop compassion and empathy. It is no accident that education, libraries, books, and groups like Drag Story Hour have been a major target of right-wing and supremacist organizing for decades. They are identifying the vital spaces where we learn the values that oppose authoritarian and supremacist domination. I will turn now to speaking a bit more about IRMS's programming and opportunities for people to get involved with. You have all joined us for our conference. We aim to have some kind of large conference event, at least every other year. These have included also anti-supremacist organizing trainings. We're very focused on bringing the community together. And this is another main part of IRMS, which is the community building aspect. One of the things that we encounter conducting research in this field is the really significant emotional and mental health toll that this work can have on researchers. And a feeling of isolation can really increase that. When IRMS launched our fellowship and mentorship program, we had our first 2 applications within 48 hours. And when we would interview our candidates applying for the fellowship program, what we typically heard was how isolated they felt at their institutions conducting this research and how grateful they were that there was now a community that they can join. Even though today there are more researchers working on aspects of male supremacism than there were 5 years ago, it is still the nature of academia in particular that you do not typically have a collection of researchers working on the same topics, except for a few unique centers in which research is conducted, such as a group like CREX that is focused on right-wing extremism. IRMS, as a virtual global community, brings together people to be able to converse with others in this field including when you just need an opportunity to rant about something that's going on or to share what's going on with other people. During the course of this conference, we had, as we always have, a digital security training to talk a bit about the risks and potential protections faced by researchers working in this field. And that security aspect is one important part of what we do, trying to prepare people, investing in supporting digital security protections. And also we've brought in legal consultants to talk about other aspects of protecting ourselves. But the fact is that a lot of harassment and abuse that occurs on social media can't be protected against. We can protect against doxing and aim to make sure that our fellows and mentees' information is not publicly available, but there is little that can be done about the general harassment occurring in a social media community. When we have our virtual community brought together, this is a space in which fellows and mentees can talk about what they're going through and indicate what they need. And often what they need is just for other people who understand and have been there before to hear as well. The IRMS community has grown over the years. We currently have more than 70 fellows and mentees, and we are increasingly moving out of the Western bias of much of this research and bringing in fellows and mentees from a variety of other countries as well. As with our conference, in which we have aimed to offer different time zones for our meetings, so that people can join from various areas, and we'll be moving into our replay section, which will replay recordings of presentations at different times so that people can reach them who weren't available during the initial session to come. All of our operations in a global sense are meant to bring this together. Because male supremacism is something that exists globally, this is a really key part of being able to really form a true understanding of male supremacist ideology. When we look across different countries, we are able to see the similarities, even if the particular country situation is different. One example of this that I like to bring up is the movements for men's rights in India, which have particularly centered around rolling back protections against dowry abuse. Dowry abuse is a term for when a husband is abusive towards his wife in order to try to extract a higher dowry from the family. And in this situation, the men's rights movement had some legal success in rolling back these protections. When we look at this situation, we see that Western men's rights movements are themselves deeply transnational and took inspiration from the example of the Indian activists. In addition, while these are different circumstances in terms of what forms of abuse occur in different countries, the kind of arguments that were made in the Indian situation, positioning women as liars who were seeking to control men through false claims of abuse, are the same types of arguments used in countries like the United States around women's accusations of sexual violence and intimate partner violence. And so we see that they are using the same kind of concepts across different countries. When we are looking across multiple countries and bringing in people from all of these situations, we're also able to see what potential interventions are and share them across different country contexts. For instance, in Latin America, there has been significant work done around raising awareness for femicide, particularly through theater and the arts. We were also interested in organizing this conference and bringing together some of voices from different countries struggling with authoritarianism. While we weren't able to organize it in time for this event, we're aiming to do a webinar over the course of the summer that will look more deeply at such countries and the lessons that can be learned. In particular, South Korea is a deeply interesting example at the moment in which their leader was elected off of a campaign deeply characterized by male supremacism and misogyny, promises to remove the department that worked on gender and sexuality justice, later implementing authoritarian martial law, and then finally being removed following a mass protest that was primarily led by women leaders. And so we're very interested to hear from an expert in that context what was involved in that situation, why they were successful, and what we might be able to bring from that into other authoritarian situations. As a researcher myself, who is based in and primarily studies the United States, these kinds of lessons are particularly interesting to me in our current situation around supremacism and authoritarianism. In addition to providing this kind of community, IRMS provides various opportunities for education, collaboration, and connecting research to action. From the point of our launch of the fellowship program, we also simultaneously launched our mentorship program, our mentor program. We are very deeply committed to the concept of encouraging early career scholars in this field. In addition, we not only support academic researchers, but people can join from other independent research organizations, journalists, or people who are otherwise involved in other kinds of positions, but doing some aspect of research on male supremacism. We think this as well, working outside just the confines of academia, enriches who we are as an organization and who we are able to support. By investing in our mentoring program, we are also able to focus in an area where we can bring in many early career researchers who are themselves vulnerable and marginalized populations, who academia has traditionally not been set up to support, and who often feel driven out of academia due to these lacks of support. Academia itself is traditionally a white male supremacist institution, and it has only very recently began to open its doors so that we can have researchers who are coming in who do not fit the white cisgender men's profile. I think part of the legacy of this is that the institution is not created to support people who are themselves vulnerable to harassment or who are embarking upon research that increasingly involves studying the very institutions, organizations, and people who are attacking their identities. And so the impact as a researcher of doing work on people who are misogynist as a woman, who are transphobic as a trans researcher, who are racist as a researcher of color, adds an additional heightened level of difficulty to the emotional strain of doing this work, and brings in new kind of perspectives as we diversify those who are able to have access to do this research. Our mentorship program thus matches fellows and mentees to work together individually on a project of their own, and also offers a curricula for mentees to be involved with that breaks down elements of male supremacism and provides a foundation for their research. I mentioned previously the white paper that we have been working on. This has also informed a redesign of our mentoring curriculum to be focused around these fundamental building blocks of supremacism. And so our new mentee curriculum starts with units on dehumanization and entitlement, discussing how they work as foundations of male supremacism. Other opportunities that are available through IRMS include the ability to work on various projects within the Institute. We're very, very grateful for the volunteers within the Institute who were committed to helping organize this conference, for instance. We also support our fellows and mentees in launching their own ideas for projects. So IRMS currently has 2 writing working groups, one that's based for US, Canadian time zones, and one that is based in European time zones. We are also hoping, as we have started to expand more, to create a 3rd working group based more around Australian and Asian time zones. These working groups were a fellow-generated idea for something that they felt would enrich their experience, and they are able to organize these writing groups through IRMS so that when new fellows and mentees come in, they are able to join these writing groups and tap into this community. We have also had other kinds of projects, which include some of the things that I've discussed already: the white paper, the mentorship curriculums. We also are looking at increasing the communications between our fellows and the public sphere. In the United States, in particular, there has been more media interest following the most recent elections. In other countries, such as the UK, where I currently am following a conference on disinformation in Cambridge, the recent Netflix TV show Adolescence has brought a lot of media attention into this issue. And so we connect fellows and mentees based on their research areas to reporters when they reach out, and are also looking to cultivate the increasing generation of blog posts and op-eds among our fellows community. IRMS has previously put out a book on male supremacism in the United States, and we are planning a 2nd volume taking a global perspective on male supremacism that will be designed in large part from the presentations and papers from this conference themselves, in which we have invited the presenters to have their abstracts considered for this book volume. And so we look to intervene from a variety of different perspectives. We also have many partners in the work that we are doing. I mentioned previously our co-sponsors for this conference, Western State Center and the Berkeley Center for Right-Wing Studies. We work with other groups in the preventing and countering violent extremism sphere. We also work with groups in the pop culture sphere. I have been a fellow with the Pop Culture Collaborative for 2 years, working with media entertainment professionals and consultants around the concept of what can be included in entertainment media to help us to understand gender in a better light. And so we bring in all of these different experiences and ideas into the Institute's functioning. Our application process for the 2025 to 2026 school year is currently open for fellows and mentees until May 15th. And so we encourage those who have joined us at the conference as presenters or those who are in the audience who are themselves researchers to look at that program and see if it would be a good fit for you to join in. I'm going to wrap up my remarks there around what IRMS kind of offers overall and the context that I have given for the state of affairs. And I will ask if there are any questions from the audience in which you would like more depth, either around an aspect of male supremacism studies or the work that IRMS does, or any questions about our fellow and mentee program and the opportunities there. I'll give another brief minute to see if anyone is typing into the chat. You can also use the raise hand function if you would like to ask a question. Yes, we have a question about the fellows. Is there something specific that you're interested in regarding the fellowship program?
Hello, thank you. Okay, hang on. Okay, there we go. Thank you so much. This has been a fantastic conference. I've learned so much. This is not my area of expertise, but I'm just curious about the fellows and how that works, what the process is, and what it looks like. That's all. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, so the basic system for fellow selection, we have an application process available on our website, in which fellows submit a research sample indicating the work that they have done around male supremacism. And we review this and interview them and see if it seems like a good fit for the organization. Once fellows go through this process and are selected, they are matched with a mentee. After beginning, they go through a brief orientation, and then they join the various community discussion forums and listservs within IRMS. When they join, we send them a survey that asks them what kind of projects they'd like to get involved with within IRMS, and also if they have any ideas for projects of their own that they are hoping to bring in through the organization. Anja, who is not here with us tonight, is the chair of our mentorship committee, and Robert Lawson is the chair of our fellowship committee. And so they also field additional questions if people come into the program. But essentially, the fellowship program is intended for anyone at any career stage who has expertise in male supremacism. And so we don't separate out our fellow and mentee programs like many institutions do by a particular career stage. We don't think that that's the most effective way in this work. And so we have many grad students who are already experts on male supremacism who come straight into our fellowship program. We also have professors who might be further in their research on other topics, but more newly moving into male supremacism, who might therefore go into the mentee program because it's geared around deepening expertise in this specific area rather than overall career stage.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yep. And we're very excited that the goal of the mentee program is also to pipeline people so that they're able to graduate into the fellow program. And so this has happened for the first time in the last year, that 2 of our mentees moved on into the fellowship program. And so beginning to set up that kind of support system that brings people through to that level.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. We have a few more in the chat. Let's see. I will jump to the third question. I will jump to the last 2 questions because they're still about the fellow program and the mentee program, and then also our board of directors. So the deadline to apply for both the mentee and fellow programs is May 15th. We had extended it from our original deadline of April 30th so that there would be enough time for anyone who learned about the program through this conference to apply. For mentees, the application process is a little bit different. Instead of providing a sample of research that you have already done, we ask for a brief statement of a research project that you are looking to do over your year within the IRMS program that you would benefit from speaking with someone as a mentor within the Institute for. I just was lucky to meet while I was out in Cambridge with a student today who is interested in our work and our programming and discussed this a little bit with her as well. One of the things that came up in that conversation, which I think is useful, is that the mentee program accepts people even if you are not currently doing research within an academic program or other institution, but may wish to develop a project that you already did, such as a master's thesis, into something that can more deeply understand male supremacism and be public facing, etc. And so you can come into this program with a concept for an idea that you're either at the starting point of, or an idea that you've already worked a bit on, but are really still looking to deepen how it understands male supremacist studies analysis. Once mentees are selected through the application process, we try very much, as long as we have enough fellows to match them with, to accept as many mentees as we can, because whatever sort of level that they are coming in on, that they have an opportunity to learn through the program. Once accepted, some of our mentees, depending on their career stage, stay in the mentee program for a number of years, and some of them move up into the fellowship program earlier. In addition, we do have an informal, what I would call a junior mentee program. We do occasionally get people who apply to the mentee program who are really at a much earlier stage of their career, and don't really have a fleshed out research project that they're looking to do, that aren't quite ready for the mentee program. In those cases, we have actually matched them with more experienced mentees who have already been in our program for at least a year, so that the more advanced mentees become mentors for these frequently undergraduate researchers who are looking to make some connection but aren't quite ready for a mentee program yet. So we don't technically advertise that program, but we do try to accommodate whenever people come into us as an organization. And so that is one of the slightly informal ways that we have set up a way that people who aren't ready for the level of our mentee program are still able to connect with somebody and to begin to develop one of those relationships. I'll move now over to the discussion about the IRMS Board of Directors, and our recruitment around there. Yes, so the link for that section apparently needs to be updated, which we will certainly do. We are about to put out our broader kind of call for members of the Board of Directors. Our board is elected for 2-year terms. They're elected in September and the term starts in October of each year. IRMS has what we call a semi-working board. And so we are still a very small budget organization, although we are very much hoping to continue growing as we have increasing interest now that the new administration in the United States and some other situations in other countries around the world have brought more interest into the organization and what we do. Our board, as what we call a semi-working board, therefore helps with certain aspects of the day-to-day and also on the strategic side and the fundraising aspect of things. And so within our board of directors, we have fellows and mentees within the organization who help to represent those aspects of what is within our programming and how it's successful. And then the rest of our board members are people coming in from externally with their various areas of expertise. In the upcoming year, I know that some of our priorities around organizational recruitment include that we are planning to go through a strategic planning process for the first time, thinking more deeply about, as I talked about a little bit earlier in tonight's talk, how we've shifted our focus a little bit as the situation for awareness around male supremacism has also shifted. And so we're looking to more formally think about where those investments might be, where we as an organization can do the best to support our community of researchers and also to counter male supremacism through our work. And so the board who comes in this fall will be coming in to a process of thinking about our vision as an organization, thinking about our strategy going forward over the next 3 to 5 years as well. On the working board side of things, board members also help out with our finances. They help out with fundraising. They help out with communications. They help out with governance, and they help out with program oversight and also legal, which is certainly an area that we expect to be significant going forward. IRMS is based, at least as of now, out of the United States as a 501c3. Our board members are welcome to join from anywhere around the globe. Our meetings are over Zoom around the organization as well. And so our aims in terms of board recruitment are to bring in a representative board that is passionate about the work of IRMS and that is interested in helping in some of these areas of organizational visioning and strategy, finance, fundraising, communications, program oversight, the various sort of aspects of making an organization work, and help us continue on this journey to hopefully becoming a larger, more sustainable organization over time. The time commitment for the board of directors is typically about 5 hours a month. And so board members attend a monthly meeting of the board and one committee that they select: finance, fundraising, program, governance, etc. And so those 2 meetings take place. That's about 2 hours of the month. And then preparation research or tax or things like that is in addition to that. If someone becomes an officer of the board, there are additional, that's usually another kind of like about 5 hours that goes into the organization as well. So the IRMS board is definitely another deeply involved area of the organization in helping to shape our priorities, our strategy, who we are, what we want to do, and provides another way for people to join and support the organization in addition to our fellowship and mentee program. We also have started accepting volunteers, so people who don't quite feel like they can make the commitment to the board of directors, but still would really like to help IRMS in some way. In the United States, especially following the last presidential election, we immediately had some very significant interest in joining us as volunteers from people who wanted to do something in addition to their regular job, to feel like they were making a significant impact in pushing back against this rising male supremacism and authoritarianism. And so we also have volunteers who come into the organization who have expertise in areas such as fundraising or communications, who join our committees and help us on a volunteer basis to develop things such as the 5-year impact report, which we will be releasing this summer, which will go over the programs and accomplishments of the organization over the past 5 years. And so those are all ways to kind of get involved with the organization. And we always accept questions at our general email address, contact@theirms.org, to give more depth about anything. For those questions around fellowship and programming and board, does anyone have further follow-up? If you want to ask any more detailed aspects of that question, you can just use the raise hands function under reaction, and I'll unmute you. Otherwise, I'm going to turn to the substantive question around male supremacism. Wonderful, great. So we have another question in the chat, which is, what aspect of male supremacism is most concerning to you currently in the United So So I think in the United States specifically, certainly because we now have a regime in power that is using authoritarian tendencies, and authoritarianism is very deeply built on male supremacism, that is a very key part of our concerns at the present moment. And so we are looking at various movements by the administration to very strictly reinforce biological essentialism, something like the executive order that is so-called protecting women, that is very strictly delineating two sexes, only recognizing essentially cisgender men and cisgender women and erasing everything else, that is a building block towards the authoritarian system, and that authoritarian systems very deeply rely on male supremacist ideology, that they need this kind of gender binary to enforce authoritarianism in the home as well. There were also recently some news about interest by the administration in enforcing certain pronatalist policies to push women to stay in the home and focus on child rearing and raising. And usually this actually means to them white women. And it was pointed out in the journalistic sources on this that this pronatalist policy is reminiscent from those used in Nazi Germany, which was built upon this as well. And so certainly within the United States, what is coming down from the authoritarian regime and how deeply male supremacism is a part of that is really, really significant for us. I would say, however, on the other side, the more kind of like grassroots and community level, that in addition to what is coming down in terms of authoritarian regimes, we're still very concerned with what children and young people, our adults, are learning on a day-to-day basis, why their support for candidates and politicians who put forward male supremacist and authoritarian viewpoints. And so this goes very much into how we have been looking at, as I mentioned very briefly in my opening remarks, the areas that are being targeted for attacks by male supremacist groups. And so there's a very concerted effort in the United States right now to ban books, to target libraries. For years, there have been attacks on comprehensive sex education, on accurate education, on race, what they call anti-CRT organizing. And so we really deeply see education as one of these main battlefields in which supremacists have recognized for a long time now, especially the theocratic Christian movement in the United States, how significant the educational system is. Betsy DeVos did a lot in sort of setting up undermining civil rights protections within the educational system. And now this is being picked up again in the new Trump administration. And so the counter to the concerns about the authoritarian regime is how people respond to this on their grassroots and community levels. And these attacks on education and the sources of information and of accurate information are looking to undermine the ability of these areas to tell people what accurate information is, to teach them critical thinking, because the best protection against disinformation is not actually telling people the true thing. It's teaching them to think critically and make decisions based on an understanding of what disinformation is and what accurate information is. And that these are also areas in which people are humanized and build empathy. And so the kind of books that are targeted for banning, the programs such as Drag Story Hour that are harassed and attacked, these are all very significant elements. We also saw an emboldening of many of these groups in 2016 after the first Trump election, a willingness to perpetrate violence, not only in the United States, but around the world. Many countries have seen increases in violence against women and violence against LGBTQI people over the past years. And so all of these areas of violence are very significant areas in which we are deeply concerned at the moment. And we are also just very concerned about how these projects have built and developed over the decades, and that they have been working within these movements for a long time, that it is not only any particular campaign or movement that evolves either online or offline, but that these are the culminations of many years of organizing, which was the subject actually of my dissertation work, where I looked at the growth of the US right wing over the past half century and thought about how groups like the Heritage Foundation became significant and now have realized a lot of their ambitions today. Let's see. I think that I've answered all of the questions that are currently in the chat. Does anyone else have any final questions? Oh, here we have another one about IRMS. Yes, so the question is how we connect our fellows and mentees to journalists and the media. So one of the decisions that we made as an organization when we were being founded is what our name was going to be. And we went with being deeply, deeply blatant about what we study so that it would be very easy for journalists to find us. The flip side of that is that an administration like this one that might be targeting C3 status, that is very obvious what we do. And we are looking at creating contingency plans around that. As IRMS has grown over the years and word of mouth about the organization has spread, we receive a lot of actually cold outreach from journalists and then develop relationships with them. And so in the last month or so, I have done interviews with ABC, with the New York Times, with the Washington Post, and also connected them with other people within our organization. And so when we receive outreach from a journalist who is interested in working on a topic, we get a mix of outreach from people who are doing longer term projects where they're looking for background and depth of information, and ones who are looking for immediate quotes. IRMS acts as a proxy to be able to connect us with which fellows or mentees are experts in this topic and to be able to help them out. One of the recent resources that we put together was for a journalist who was specifically interested in the role of leaders and influencers in male supremacist online organizing, who wanted to know who they might look into to build sort of research around. And so we put together a spreadsheet of the various influencers that our fellows work on and which fellows work on them and who they could connect with around those topics. And so IRMS essentially currently functions as kind of a clearinghouse where we're able to bring in kind of people who see the organization, have seen our work, and then move them on to other members of the fellow and mentee community. What we would like to do more in terms of our future efforts, which is the second part of the question, we have had an op-ed training for our fellows and mentees previously, and we would like to develop more of that work around writing op-eds and blog posts. And so to have an increased capacity to be able to connect our fellows and mentees with the kind of public scholarship that they frequently want to do, Also things like webinars and podcasts that put out additional information, and when people come in through those events to learn and potentially follow up, and to essentially be able to reach out and forge more of those connections. I think especially in countries like the United States, where there are very significant authoritarian threats, particularly ones that might pose threats to the media outlets themselves, building these individual relationships with journalists and reporters is a really significant part of what we do as an organization, so that we have the relationships to be able to tap in when some kind of issue comes up, and also to be there for background and analysis when they're looking to understand one of the many things that are coming out rapidly. Because IRMS is global as well, we are able to respond to things coming from many different countries. We are mostly an English language organization, which is one of the aspects of the organization that we hope to be able to adjust more over time. Our fellows and mentees, some of them speak multiple languages, and so we will connect them to journalists and reporters, sometimes who are coming from Spanish language media or German or other areas. We also, something to mention actually about the fellow and mentee program, is that even though our interviews and those aspects are done in English, we are able to accept research samples in a few different language areas, where we have fellows who are able to review those research samples in other languages, because we know in many countries, researchers and academics might be more likely to be publishing a lot of their work in their country's home language rather than in English. And so we have tried as much as possible to incorporate that. And it is another area that we hope to be able to continue to grow in with more resources in the future. Let's see, we have another question. So this last question is about whether I see a rise in anti-capitalist activism and research, and how I see that aligning with the fight against male supremacism. So this is not a specific focus of my research. If this was a question that I received from a journalist coming through the account, I would point them to one of our other fellows who I think would be more of an expert in this area. I think that the main thing that I would say around this concept is that male supremacism is in part built on the concept of there being a lack of economic opportunity, and that is the fault of feminists. And so I think that one of the aspects when we work on the concept of capitalism and male supremacism, and we work on, the fact that over the past decades, women and people of color have gained increasing rights to things such as, women being able to have credit cards in their own name and own property in their own names, which it is, actually not that far in the past where this was not the case. And so much of the sort of misaligned critique of male supremacism is the idea that men are being left behind because women are gaining more rights. And I think that there are a couple of dimensions to that. It is absolutely the case that if you are a privileged group in a supremacist system, that you do not have to compete with many other people who are coming in, that the increase in equality means that unjustified privileges do not exist anymore. But it's also an extremely zero-sum way of thinking, which is, I think, embedded in the capitalist system, rather than thinking about what we can be doing as a community to improve the democratic situation, social services, job opportunities, all of these aspects of things for everybody. And so I think, I would say a lot of what IRMS does in terms of discussing prevention and intervention is looking at prevention and intervention that reaches the general population at large instead of focusing just in on one group. And so things like our researchers who work more around economic systems, thinking about how the capitalist structure, the structure of a government very deeply embedded with corporations, is set up to try to use scapegoating to blame vulnerable and marginalized populations for economic distress instead of the flaws of the capitalist system, the zero-sum game, and really the lack of investment and care for the entire community of people. So we're coming to the last few minutes before we are going to turn to our final social and networking hour for people to have a chance to talk to one another. Is there any final questions that anyone would like to raise, or any clarifications or anything else before we wrap up this final closing talk of the conference? I'm seeing thank yous in the chat, which is always great to hear. It's very appreciated. I'm so glad for anyone who enjoyed the conference. I actually, because I have been in Cambridge, UK, where it is just about coming on midnight now, for this disinformation summit, have not had the opportunity to view most of the panels, although I was able to see this afternoon's panels, which I was very excited about. So I will be consuming them in the replay section of the conference. As a reminder, that will be a 2-week period following the conference in which the presentations are still available for replay for those who weren't able to see them live. We will be sending out, after all of our final Zoom recordings have finished coming together, information about how people will be able to access those recordings. So I definitely encourage continuing to connect over the next 2 weeks. IRMS has as well an email listserv where we send out information about our fellow and mentee programs, our board of directors, articles and thoughts about the present political situation. We also, because as I mentioned before, have a community of more than 70 fellows and mentees who are all working on their own projects around male supremacism. So our listserv also shares when there are CFPs for edited books or special issues of journals that they might be working on, when we're recruiting interns, when we have other organization opportunities within the organization, in addition to our fellow and mentee recruitment and our board recruitment periods. And so we have that email list. We primarily use Blue Sky as our social media in the present day. So we encourage you following there as well for ongoing information about products coming out of IRMS, about the work of our fellows and mentees. We will also be working on some other resources and toolkits in the upcoming months around creative, innovative, long-term, historically and culturally informed approaches to anti-supremacist and anti-authoritarianism authoritarian community resistance, embedded as well in values of joy and sustainability for the communities themselves. Right. Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it. And we are going to stop the recording and shift now into our final social hour. So,
all right, we're done. We're done. We're done. We win, they lose. And that's just the way it is. We win, they lose. We did it. We infiltrated their entire conference. That was the very last talk at the conference, streamed live publicly on the internet. And do you guys know why I can get away with this? Do you guys know why I can get away with doing that? Because these people do not pay attention to us. They do not pay attention to us at all in any way. And so why not just take advantage of it? I knew they weren't watching me closely anyway. They're over on Blue Sky in an echo chamber. And to be quite frank, there was nothing they really could have done about it if they had figured it out, because I'm not signed up for that conference under my real name. So we did it. We have 4 days worth of conference recordings. We have now their final session. Bot asked in the chat, were there any sessions that we missed? We missed maybe 2 sessions, and I'm not really worried about it. Honestly, maybe they figure out who I was, maybe they don't. It doesn't really matter. We have probably 30 hours of footage of this conference. And do you guys want to go into a highlight reel? Do you guys want to see the highlights of this conference? Listen, we are going to be having serious conversations about some of the things I learned in this conference over the next week. I'm going to tell you that right now. So there are many takeaways that I learned in this conference. You heard some of them. Listen, people have been saying like in reference to that presentation specifically, people are saying like, doesn't she have a job? Doesn't she have a job? Doesn't she have a job? This is her job. She is funded to do this by the University of California, Berkeley. Every single person at this event is funded to do this by the University of California, Berkeley, by the Western States Center, by whoever else they work with who are funding their institute. Like leftists, and this should terrify everyone, because like for the amount of time that the right says the left doesn't have a job, the left doesn't have a job, the left doesn't have a job, the left doesn't have a job. Well, guess what? They do have jobs. They're getting paid to study you. Literally. Their job. Every single person we saw at this conference over the past 4 days, their literal job, what they get paid for, is to study the right wing. And they're not even that good at it, to be honest. Like, they got a lot of stuff wrong at this conference, but that doesn't matter. The left is massively funding researchers through the universities to study the right wing. And it's not just professional researchers. Graduate students are studying the right wing. PhD students are studying the right wing. They're writing master's theses and dissertations in far greater quantities than you might think, just studying the right wing and then talking to each other about what the right is doing and how they can get ahead of it. And that should really terrify everyone, because this does not happen on our side. There is no one that I know of doing the type of work I do, studying the left. And again, I always say this, if you guys know of someone that's doing this, please tell me who they are. It's not out of the realm of possibility that I would not, that I don't know everything in the world, right? So there could be people out there doing this that I've never heard of. If you know of people doing this, please tell me, because I actually do want there to be other people doing this. I don't take any pleasure in saying I'm the only person doing this, because it is mind-boggling to me that I am the only person doing this. It is still unbelievable. I would love to create our own conference, I've even thought about it in the course of this conference, and this might be something I actually do. Do I set up my own nonprofit center of left-wing studies? Do I actually do that? I could do that. I have misgivings about running a nonprofit, but on the flip side, I could get grants, I could get tax-deductible gifts. Like, I could actually do that. But is there anyone else doing this? Is the thing. So I don't know, man. And the thing of it is even if they're doing a half-assed job, and even if some of their ideas are crazy, they're still doing it. the sheer virtue of them doing it, where our side, the anti-communist side, I mean, there are people all in all sorts of different political positions here, but like mostly more right-leaning, we are not doing this to the left. The left is doing this to us. They are studying us like we're lab rats running around a maze. And you're going to see that in the course of the clips from this conference. Yes, the clips are going to be funny. Yes, the clips are going to be crazy. Yeah, that I guarantee you guys, your jaw is going to drop so many times in watching the footage from this conference. And we are going to be watching a highlight reel. So the highlight reel that I've put together is from the first couple days of the conference. Obviously, none of the stuff we watched today, and we've been streaming since about 11 a.m. watching that conference. None of it that we watched today is going to be in the highlight reel because we literally just got done watching it today. You're going to see a couple pre-conference workshop things in the highlight reel, and you're going to see highlights from the first couple days. But I'm going to tell you this, there are more highlights from the first couple days than I put into this highlight reel. I just had to go to bed last night, so I couldn't spend any more time making it. But like I put the highlight reel is 2 hours long. That's the highlight reel. And that's not even everything I have. So what I'm going to do that I thought would be fun for everyone is I'm going to play the highlight reel. And we're going to watch it together. It's like a world premiere. Now, the highlight reel is also currently available on my oh my goodness, I have like too many screens up. The highlight reel is currently available on my Substack. That is Karlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. That is where you can support my work. Guys, if you appreciate this work, if you appreciate the fact that I just spent 4 days sitting in every single session at the conference for the Institute into the Research of Male Supremacism, recording all of it just for you guys to show what's going on, please consider funding my work today. I am doing a membership drive on the Substack. I'd like to get about 400 new paying members of my Substack before the end of the summer. So we got about 4 months to do it. More than reasonable, to be honest. But the reason I want to get more paying members is I have stuff I want to fund in the back half of the year. And I only get to do this stuff if you guys support the work I'm doing. I am the only person that I know of that is covering this type of material, especially to the depth that I'm covering it. And I'm doing that because it is desperately needed information that people need to be looking at. If we are not archiving this, if we're not recording this, if we're not putting this stuff together, then we are at a massive disadvantage to the left. The left is doing this through the universities, through the graduate programs, through the PhD programs. I'm who you got on this side that I know of. Again, if you know of someone else doing this, please tell me who they are. But the thing of it is we need to be supporting this type of thing right now. I'm sorry. If you want any hope of beating the left at all, then please fund what I'm doing. Honestly, I'm not saying I'm the perfect solution. I'm not the perfect solution, but at least I'm doing something, okay? And I cannot produce this material without your help. I can't produce this material without your support. I can't spend time doing this stuff if you guys don't fund my ability to do so. So if you appreciate the work I'm doing, head over to my Substack. That is Karlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. Sign up for $8 a month, $80 a year. You will get access to spy streams just like we've been doing for the last week. If you want to, we're doing more spy streams next week. So we're going inside more leftist trainings next week. There are just a ton of them right now. And so if you guys want access to future spy streams, you want to come join me for like a live infiltration, sign up as a supporter. You will get access to that and many other things. And I really do appreciate it. All right. Well, why don't we get into the clip reel? And I'm going to say this. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take myself off of camera because you don't need to see me on the screen twice, okay? I'm going to hang out in the chat with you guys, and we're going to watch the clip reel together. And let's just have a good time in the chat. No rules of the chat. If you guys want to shitpost, if you guys want to make fun of them, I'm not going to be banning anyone tonight unless you insult me or someone else in the chat. Don't insult, like, here are the basic rules of the chat for tonight, okay? Don't insult me. I've worked way too hard over the last 4 days to deal with your bullshit right now. Don't insult anyone else in the chat. Some people in the chat have been watching this stuff with me for the past 4 days. They deserve a little bit of a break. But if you want to shitpost, yes, you can shitpost in the chat. You can make fun of them. You can do whatever you want. All the rules are lifted. Just be nice to each other, okay? We are all each other has. And so I will hang out with you guys in the chat and we'll watch it together. And if you have questions for me, put them in the chat. If we need to pause the video for whatever reason to answer questions, we can. But it is 2 fucking hours long. We're going to watch 2 fucking hours worth of clips from a couple of days of this conference, not even the whole thing. And over the next several weeks, probably, because it is honestly going to take a long time, I will be releasing much shorter clips. So people have already given me shit on Twitter. They're like, Karlyn, you put out a 2-hour video. I'm like, this is what I have right now. Calm down, okay? But I will be taking all the clips in that video, making much shorter clips. I will also be releasing other clips that are much shorter that you guys don't know about yet because I haven't made them yet. But I can only do so many things at once. I've been doing this conference thing for 4 days. I didn't have time to make a bunch of clips for you guys, all right? You get the highlight reel right now, and that highlight reel took me till 4 a.m. last night, and I just want everyone to be a little bit more appreciative. That's all I'm saying. So who's ready to watch the highlight reel, guys? Mount the like button if you're ready to watch the highlight reel. And if you feel like sending me in a super chat or something as we're doing the highlight reel, I will display it on screen. Of course, I appreciate all the support because God knows I need it after. I need to go buy a drink. I need to go get some beer. You guys want to buy me a beer? You guys want to buy me several beers? You guys want to buy me like something stronger? I don't know, man. But let's watch the highlight reel. All right. And I'm just going to take myself off the video. We're just going to watch this all. We're going to watch this all together. And I hope you guys enjoy it. And let me just do this. Hang on. We'll get it full screen. We'll get it all nice and fancy. All right, guys. Well, let's get this party started. We are watching the highlight reel of the first couple days of the conference for the Institute of Male Supremacism. Hang on to your hats. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. Hang on to your hats because you're not going to believe this. All right, let's get started. Oh, already messed it up. Already messed it up. Already messed it up. Already messed it up. There we go. I've spent the last 4 days undercover at the Institute for Research into Male Supremacism annual conference. And look, I'm in my office, so obviously this is not traditional undercover. That's because the entire conference was virtual. So I didn't get to get on a plane and wear a disguise and wear a chest binder like I had to do the last time. I got to do this one from my computer, but that just made it easier to record everything. And trust me when I tell you guys, you are not going to see anything crazier than I've seen in the last 4 days. I have been watching the left religiously almost every single day for years. I've gone undercover at their events multiple times. I spend hours every single week listening to these people. And even then, my jaw dropped in almost every single presentation, at least once. It is going to take weeks to release all the clips that I have of this conference, and I'm going to be doing it mostly on my Substack, Karlyn, Karlyn.substack.com. Of course, make sure you go subscribe. I'll be posting them on Twitter at Dr. Karlyn B, DrKarlyn, the letter B. And I don't know how this stuff is not going to I don't know how you guys aren't going to be floored at what we saw. And you don't believe me? Hang on. I've got a little highlight reel. You guys want to see a highlight reel? These are a couple clips, just a tiny little fraction of what I have of the craziest things from the first couple days. And there's going to be many more coming. And if you guys think the left is slowing down, I'm telling you they're not. They're accelerating. It's going to get worse. It's going to get nuts. We're talking 2020 levels of insanity. And, just watch. You'll understand. Okay, watch.
Welcome to the 2025 Male Supremacism Studies Conference. My name is Elsa Bengtsson-Muller, and I am a fellow here at the Institute for Research on Male Supremacism, and I'm honored to open this conference.
I think a solution that will really disrupt capitalism, honestly, is deplatforming people and making specific websites, forums, whatever, illegal, and actually having like consequences, material consequences. Although I'm an abolitionist, I know that we have to kind of exist in our world with the things that we have currently. Because in reality, I would just want to burn everything the fuck down and rebuild something new, but that can't be done. So I think that deplatforming is probably the swiftest way for us to do that.
and making sure people stay deplatformed. So not being like Elon Musk and letting Trump and Milo Yiannopoulos get back on Twitter now that he owns it, right? When he was deplatformed when Jack Dorsey was there, right? So really like standing on business and making sure people do not have access to these social media websites and forums that allow them to perpetuate and push this information in digital spaces, because that's where the youth is getting this information from. It's not coming from the man on the corner talking about it. It's coming from TikTok. It's coming from Reddit. It's coming from these different websites that are talking about it. And like I said earlier, there's a lot of nuance around the language that's being used that some of us who are of a particular age, we may not even know that's the language that they're using to talk about these things, right? That's kind of my thoughts on that.
This is, there's a scholar, Yotam Ophir, who, along with someone else whose name I don't remember right now, speaking of, he was looking at rom-coms from the 80s to the present and showing that they've become increasingly misogynist in content, and that there's actually been an increase in sort of like Hallmark Channel type like right-wing themes, and like sort of using the romantic narrative. You can look and see that this like narrative of romance becomes this narrative of political conversion. The women give up feminism or embrace Christianity, right? These themes are becoming more and more present, and more politicized. I teach media literacy every year. I think indoctrinating the youth is a wonderful way to spend your time. I think like this is what I've been doing for maybe 10 years. And I
believe that the intersection of MLMs, masculinity, and radicalization is an important and under-theorized area of study. I actually started doing some of this research by applying it to the Rogan sphere, if you will. That was where I started. I do consider Rogan to be a sort of softer version of this. I think there is a higher, from what I can tell, there's like a higher percentage of what somebody like Rogan says, that they couch it in more common sense than somebody like Tate. Maybe not much more, but at least marginally more common sense, with, in his case, considerably less of the actual downlining that we see. It doesn't function in quite the same way as multi-level marketing firms, but it does function in ways that we see at capitalist companies work, right? Because Rogan and Jones spend an inordinate amount of their airtime selling products that they themselves are connected to. So there's definitely a lot of similarities, and I would eventually like to expand this work to places where I see the actual influence as potentially less specifically pernicious, but a lot more influential overall, right? I mean, the likes of somebody like Joe Rogan is just almost inordinately more popular and more known than somebody like Tate. Then also in these spaces, I'm seeing a lot of jokes and innuendos, right, that trying to appeal to people's sense of humor and crassness, among other things. Good question. That's something we saw. I think we're seeing that in the most recent change with the 2024 election here, like in the election cycle that was coming in, with what Donald Trump used a very similar strategy by sort of largely, a lot of this was talked about in terms of Joe Rogan, but also like Theo Vaughn, Andrew Schultz, a number of these other sort of manfluencers or mini manfluencers, if you will. Donald Trump utilized them, piggybacked off of them and their influence in order to reach his target demographic. So
I primarily work on critical menstruation studies. That's my area of interest. But
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I will be presenting on male supremacism and the Indian manosphere, beginning with the term manosphere refers to a network within the online space spanning collection of websites, blogs, and online communities that mobilize around narratives of restoration of male domination. And specifically in India, where the Giga Chad meme content is very popular. Online, through online gurus and podcast hosts, and basically these are communities of men who we can also call gurus or leaders. now that we say that we are in a sort of a post-capitalist or a post-modernist society. I'm not saying for out and out hate speech, but we see that certain people in power in America, the way the tone, especially the president, the way he speaks about women, we know that who he is sort of gesturing to and which community he's kind of encouraging.
Since incel ideology is fundamentally rooted in male supremacy and anti-feminism, how explicit do you find the misogynistic elements in this content?
Yeah, okay. I was just like, yeah, because I'm so used to doing certain ways with Zoom. I'm like, either I'm not straight or I'm straight a little bit.
Thrilled to introduce Anne. She's a second-year PhD student in cultural anthropology at Vanderbilt University. She was born and raised in France and wrote 2 master's theses focusing respectively on the intersectionality of white supremacy and the role of masculinity in the rise of American domestic terrorism. Her research focuses on male supremacists of color in the US and the paradoxical way they perform a hegemonic white supremacist imbued masculinity. She's presenting a paper today that investigates the recruitment process of these male supremacists of color into an ideology that is fundamentally against their own. And so during the interview, I was asking my informant, so if she had one advice to give an Asian man to be more successful, especially with women, what would it be? And his answer was very telling. He said, you need to be 6 foot, look like Ryan Gosling, and be rich. So this shows, how male supremacists conform to Western white standards of beauty and success, and demonstrate a strong influence and the appeal of white supremacy within male supremacist ideology, and the impact of white Western hegemonic model of masculinity over male supremacists of color. So my main arguments are threefold. The first one is that male supremacism and its various enactments tend to transcend race and ethnicity to re-embed white supremacy in their performance and discourse. Indeed, if we think of like the enactment of an archetypal American masculinity, it seems to be concomitantly intercrossed with racial expectations of respectability and normative whiteness, and conformity that coalesce into the performance of normative whiteness. So American masculinity therefore deploys what I would call like a multifaceted reality between gender and race, which buttresses the performance of whiteness. And so I argue that non-white masculinities ultimately conform to Western definitions of masculinity, thereby re-embedding white supremacy. And I can't stress enough that this is obviously in an American Western context. My second argument is that male supremacists of color rely on their gender to seem to compensate the lack of validation and recognition they might receive due to their race. Ultimately, their performance of masculinity is for the benefit of the white gaze, even when they perform a more hybridized version of their masculinity. And how do non-white male supremacists come to embrace an ideology which endorses white supremacy and ultimately denies them their humanity? If we think about how they perform their masculinity in a way that is mostly influenced by Western white points of view, how do they navigate this racial identity? How do they deal with the stereotypes that are associated with their masculinity?
I'm Catherine Baker, and today I'm going to be presenting on my Research Ireland postdoctoral fellowship funded project on the use of claims to science within far-right manosphere and anti-gender organizing. For example, alternative medicine and crunchy lifestyle content has become a well-trodden digital pathway to white supremacist conspiracy narratives. Claims to scientific authorities have always been used by the far right to legitimize and naturalize hierarchical social arrangements. So examining the attacks on science and academia by the US administration that disproportionately target forms of science and academia that challenge taken for granted truths of dominant social and institutional arrangements and capitalist structures. And this demonstrates an important aspect of far-right and supremacist politics, which is the strategic re-articulation of what is meant by a scientific understanding of the world, one that explicitly ignores any inquiry into anything that challenges existing power relations.
Let me share my screen. Okay. Okay. So let me get this started. Since having a slow day with my computer, I was like worried about losing connection and all, and then I'm also dealing with a little cold, so please forgive me if I'm struggling to speak. But okay, so anyway, let's get this started. Thank you everyone for coming. This consists of this idea that there's some sort of agenda going on or moral panic that comes back to conspiracy theory, the LGBT plus grouping conspiracy theory, and cultural Marxism. And a lot of these movements consist of these far-right organizations, figures like the Heritage Foundation and Alliance Defending Freedom. So the Western understanding of gender, sex, and sexuality. So I've noticed a lot of users have dismissed the idea that non-binary identity exists, or they believe it's some sort of trend, or it's not legit in some ways, or there's a universal assumption of gender and sex. So examples include users claiming that they have a female brain, a male gene, or this abstract understanding of what they call biological reality. As a lot of them have argued, claiming that people are supposed to be either male or female and have certain types of autonomy, like having XX chromosome, having higher level of estrogen, or certain reproductive system that's supposed to prove ultimately of the gender they're assigned at birth. And another thing worth mentioning is that I've noticed autism is often mentioned or discussed as some type of cause of the gender dysphoria. Like in one of the posts I found, that's which is actually one of the most popular ones in that subreddit, is this image, this meme where it shows a young girl walking up the stairs. This goes from autism, social media, and then transitioning to regret. Which that's a recurring theme I've noticed users discoursing, where they claim that social media also supposedly brainwashed them to transition, and then supposedly going further into the steps like that. That term rapid onset gender dysphoria and autogenophilia are arguably a form of pseudoscience because of the connection arguments they're making that doesn't really make any sense. But specifically, they claim that they have experienced gender dysphoria through social influences or this alleged social contamination. And while autogenophilia refers to the idea that trans women are transitioning for a sexual fantasy, but I noticed the themes along with that is that a lot of these people have argued, claiming that public education, like universities, public schools, their friends, social media, especially with Instagram, Tumblr, YouTube, and even anime, specifically, hopefully I'm pronouncing this correctly, yaoi, which I know means boys love in Japanese, have somehow influenced them to transition. But also it uses detrans as a moral panic to restrict access to gender affirmative care, as again, it goes back to the fear of objection, which plays a role in fascism, because part of fascism is radicalizing people into fear. And so thank you everyone, and hopefully this makes sense. And I'm sorry I rambled a bit, but hopefully this helps a lot.
Thank you so much, Kat. I did just want to make a quick comment at present, because we've had some, I would say, an inflammatory comment in the chat. We have removed that user just because it's not how shit works here. Apologies for me swearing. But for those who are unfamiliar with how the IRMS defines male supremacism, I want to be very clear when I state this, that our organizational definition is specifically focused on the power that cisgender heterosexual men have in society. And this is something that negatively impacts both cis and trans women, trans men, and gender non-conforming folks across the globe. If you are not open to that, please do not stick around. I'm not mincing words here. This is not the space. Apologies for coming off slightly aggressive, but there has been some discussion in the chat. And I want to make that clear that this is an inclusive and safe space for our panelists, for our attendees, and for the people who are part of the IRMS today. Apologies, Kat, that happened during your presentation, but if it was going to happen at any point, it was probably that one. I am a criminologist by trade, And the history of criminology is terrible. It is very white, it is very male, but it's rooted in racist and white supremacist ideas of who is criminal and why, because of, you know, outdated ideas around physical proportions, but also things around homosexuality as deviance, as duplicitous, as dirty, as disease-ridden. And there's so much of a legacy of oppression, of harm, that we bring as researchers when we're trying to platform a more nuanced and fresher approach that we are dealing with. And I think it's interesting to see across your works how some of these legacies of harm come to the fore for harmful and malicious actors who latch on to research that appears to validate the claims that they're making. I think it's fascinating. I could speak all day on this.
Connecting to the detrans spaces, but I've noticed that it comes back to like the understanding of like what does it mean to be a woman. And I've noticed the understanding of it is very traditional, but also very Western. So like an example I've noticed from TERFs and the trade wife spaces is that they'll say, oh, men and women are very different. They can't work together. They can't do this. They can't do that.
Just asking about, in anti-trans detransition spaces, have you come across racism or white supremacist themed criticism of trans women? Do you find eugenicist thinking used to justify detransitions in these spaces or elsewhere?
Okay. Yeah, I've definitely noticed racism in that space. Like I've noticed it's not uncommon for people to say stuff like, oh, well, women don't look like this. Like most women have this kind of trait and they don't have this type of voice and da 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 da. And I think about like the idea, like what does it mean to be a woman? And I think how like in racism, scientific racism, they try to argue to say like, oh, white women are more feminine, they're more fragile. And this comes back to the idea that women are more fragile than men. But also what I noticed is that through the eugenics, they try to say like there's lesser people or that there's people with like inferior genes. Like the term degenerate, I noticed the word degenerate was often used or found in that subreddit where they say, oh, there's something wrong with these people, they're degenerates. And then it's funny because I'm still learning about like the history of eugenics, but I've noticed that term being used much more. So I plan to look further into that, especially like how does whiteness influence our understanding of gender? Does that make sense?
So one of the most difficult aspects of it has been the funding cuts to research, which is aimed at preventing us from researching such topics. So we have to be more and more strategic regarding the word use and which terms we use, which methodology we use. And in a way, this forces us to, be, inventive and creative, but it's also a huge handicap. So yeah, I was applying to, like, I was starting to apply to like an NSF, and obviously there was like some funding cuts to the federal grants, and one of my I was actually very worried because I was thinking, maybe they will actually target, like, identify the people who work on such topics and maybe like flag them or something. And one of my advisors was joked around saying that actually they might fund this kind of research because it allows them to identify their voting pool, or like their potential voting pool. So in one way or another, it's a really ideal time to yeah, it's a trap. It's not an ideal time to be studying this, but we need to keep going. Obviously, I think there's a lot of there's a real emotional side to the appeal of male supremacism, which really finds its roots in feelings of fear. Someone mentioned in the chat, like, the fact that their reality is being disrupted, and this disrupting the binarity of gender is putting them off. And I think there's that, plus this concentration of anger and resentment that is built up. Like, I hesitate to use the term aggrieved entitlement just because Michael Kimmel has been accused of sexual assault, so I don't think we should
really give credit to his theories, but there is definitely the fact that some of their privileges are being questioned and challenged, and that creates a lot of emotional response, and they need to have some sort of vessel to channel all these emotions, and I think male supremacism is one of them.
I did want to jump in with a question in the chat and sort of rephrase it slightly to what you just said, Catherine. I think when we think about science and we think about the ways that science can be used for political ends, it gets me thinking about where our role as researchers is in this. And somebody in the chat has raised that RFK Jr.'s autism database and his targeting of neurodiverse individuals, specifically those with autism, has sort of towed that line into, I would say, a pseudoscientific sort of dog whistly type thing. And I'm wondering, how can we go about critiquing the use of science in this way when we are up against such entrenched power structures that are almost politically muzzling the science that is trying to call these acts out? Again, a very heavy question. Sorry guys, I'm just fast.
But then in the end, it all kind of comes back to this kind of biological reality which underpins patriarchy, capitalism, etc. So there's so much tension in all of this work, because biological essentialism doesn't really line up with the reality of the world, and therefore there's inherently going to be tensions. I would say, sometimes I'm pulling my hair out because I'm like, none of this follows. It's just a mishmash of kind of ideas pushed together with the common sense idea, but there is biological reality. But if you unpick it, it kind of becomes a mess. But I think sometimes those tensions are kind of fascinating, and the way in which the veneers and the rhetorics will kind of chop and change. But if you follow to its logical conclusion, it's kind of a mess. But I do find these kind of new wave bioessentialist feminist speakers who, again, are very we're very pro-woman, this is how you be a leftist, but are only in right-wing podcasts, So that's an interesting tension, and I'd like to look at that more.
Because this is amazing. This is one of the best infiltrations ever, and we still have so much more to go, and we already have so many clips and so much material. It's just everything. It's beautiful. It's everything I always hoped it would be, and I'm really glad that all of you are here with me today.
Karlyn's presentation today is titled "From NoFap to Anti-Porn: How far-right sexual ideology went mainstream." Karlyn, go ahead. You can show your slides if you have them.
No slides, just me. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming today. I'm just going to dive right into it. So over the last 2 decades, anti-porn and anti-masturbation movements have increasingly cropped up in digital spaces, and they've gained a mainstream following. The 2 most popular anti-porn and anti-masturbation communities are NoFap and No Nut November, and both began as forums on Reddit. They're connected by the belief that porn and masturbation are detrimental to the mental and physical well-being of men. Anti-porn and anti-masturbation communities have a pretty significant following, with r/No Nut November having 52,000 daily posters during the month of November. No Nut November, of course, refers to a challenge where men abstain from masturbation for the entirety of the month of November, with abstinence from porn strongly encouraged. NoFap's website has almost 361,000 members, and r/NoFap has 1.2 million members. Members describe porn as a pollutant to the mind, a disservice to the body, and a monstrosity, to name a few. Foucault's location of masturbation as the first form of prohibition and problematization of sex in the West, and the application of biopolitics to masturbation, allows an exploration of the regulatory work that anti-porn and anti-masturbation communities do, particularly in the form of nationalist reproduction. Masturbation ends up functioning as a site of evaluating the improper body or the proper body, and more specifically, it exposes masculine failure. So a real man is in charge of what his body does and not its victim. The regulation of sexual desire and behavior becomes a reassertion of masculine control over oneself and, by extension, the world. Men are tasked to be on guard toward any sexual urges that will destroy them in body, mind, and spirit on the individual level. And this expands to imagining a sick family, the weak nation, and the degeneration of what it means to be a man. Therefore, management of individual and social ills is done through the management of the sexual self. Masculine willpower is positioned as an antidote to the feminizing and weakening lure of decadent modernity. And this constant attention to urges, desires, content consumption, and behaviors become how appropriate masculinity is managed. In this way, the panic over masturbation and porn expresses deeper concerns over the fate of masculinity and stable notions of gender in a period of social, economic, and political change. So what NoFap and No Nut November point to is a kind of aspirational and ideal masculine virility that is constructed as self-evident, natural, and not open to negotiation. Other studies show that NoFap serves as an entry point for men into more explicit manosphere and content through its reification of heterosexist, ableist, and racist hierarchies. So in this way, anti-masturbation and anti-porn ideology finds itself cozied up to emerging fascisms. The Proud Boys meetup document, titled The States of the Congregation, outlines expectations for Proud Boy members. The middle section of this document is dedicated to outlining what's called the 3 degrees, and these mark levels of Proud Boy membership. You can only be considered a member of the Proud Boys if you were assigned male at birth, currently identify as male, and have been initiated through the 2nd degree. Given that the 2nd degree determines if someone's a full member of the Proud Boys, it's important to look at what it's asking. A subsection under the 2nd degree outlines the appropriate masturbatory behaviors for members. This is actually titled No Whites. The section is short and it's worth quoting in full, so I'm going to do that now. Quote, a Proud Boy may not ejaculate alone more often than once every 30 days. That means he must abstain from pornography during that time, and if he needs to ejaculate, it must be within 1 yard of a woman with her consent. The woman may not be a prostitute. This is our religion, and our Pope is the religion's founder, Dante Nero. Men who are away from their wives for extended periods of time have requested video conferencing as a way around the 1 yard rule. This is not allowed, end quote. So the Proud Boys are really drawing a direct correlation between being a good nationalist soldier for Western civilization and anti-porn and anti-masturbation. The founder of the Proud Boys, Gavin McInnes, refers to NoFap in an article in the far-right publication Talkies Magazine in 2015, where he talks about the dangers of pornography, masturbation, and social decadence. Gavin McInnes' article begins with lamenting spoiled millennials, presumably male, who are surrendering to the overbearing, out-of-touch feminists. McInnes discusses a solution, no pornography or masturbation more than once in 30 days, sounding much like the start to his Proud Boys clause a year later. 1 year after that, Alexander Rhodes appears on a talk show hosted by Gavin McInnes, and months later, the Proud Boys are founded. 3 years after that, a thread on 4chan titled Self-Improvement General displays a post explicitly linking self-improvement to fascism titled Hitler is unironically my role model. Self-actualization comes in the form of modeling oneself as a capable fascist individual. Self-improvement general threads push for abstinence from porn and masturbation, citing both declining testosterone rates and anti-Semitic conspiracy theories that Jewish people created the porn industry to destroy the white race, particularly through the normalization of interracial sex. David Duke, neo-Nazi and former Grand Wizard of the KKK, claimed that Jewish people, quote, see pornography as a weapon of revenge for real or imagined European wrongs against Jews from the time of Romans to the modern day, end quote. The logic goes that more than being motivated by just profit, Jewish people in the porn industry actually seek to destroy Western civilization by addicting young white men to porn. This addiction also pushes them to greater heights, driving them to trans, gay, and interracial pornography. The subsequent demasculinization of white men ultimately is figured as the destruction for the white race. This plays into the alt-right theory of white genocide and the preoccupation with declining birth rates. Of course, this connection is not new. Several pages of Mein Kampf detail the spread of syphilis via Jewish sex workers, which to Hitler jeopardized the continuation of the Aryan race. The Nazis' umbrella term for pornography, sex work, queerness, and abortion is sexual Bolshevism, which referred to the progressive cultural movements and was linked to perceptions of sexual degeneracy. This echoes the contemporary far right's usage of cultural Marxism. And the term cultural Marxism broadly refers to a claim that a cabal of Jewish elites are using modern culture and progressive movements as a means of weakening the Western population, making it susceptible to take over. One post on 4chan states, self-improvement is absolutely political. The Jews, globalist elites, whoever you want, have put a lot of time, money, and effort into destroying our people. They've poisoned our well with pornography, race mixing, video games, degeneracy. They have dedicated everything to ruining us. Self-improvement general is us fighting back. They need you to be a useless fat virgin, neckbeard with cystic acne and no friends. It terrifies them to consider that we aren't what they want us to be. That there exists a group of physically fit, handsome, sociable, successful, hygienic, happy, independent, capable, and competent men out there who are ready to destroy everything they have done so far. The preoccupation with Western superiority and its vulnerabilities is one connection that brings anti-porn and anti-masturbation together with far-right ideology. The Proud Boys draw a line between the promotion and superiority of the Western world with sexual restraint and abstinence from porn, and linking porn, and by extension sexual excess, to a Jewish plot to destroy Western civilization through the feminization of white men, depleted testosterone and virility, and cuckolding, furthers this logic and echoes a history of mobilizing racialization and sexual dangers for nationalist ideology. Masturbation and porn signal the ever-present specter of racial degeneration. A post in r/nofap states, quote, white people are being outbred by Muhammad, Jamal, Chang, and Enrique. Don't fap, breed, end quote. Anti-porn and anti-masturbation movements are just as preoccupied with the concept of the family as the far right is, with members frequently discussing the aspiration to find a lasting relationship, have children, and focus on building a family. McInnes's article detailing his no-fap journey is full of references to better, more successful marriages, and couples who are finally able to conceive once the husband gives up porn and masturbation. At the Natural Conservatism Conference in 2021, far-right Senator Josh Hawley laments the decline of healthy masculinity in America. Quote, American men are working less, they're getting married in fewer number, they're fathering fewer children. A man is a father, a man is a husband, end quote. In a 2022 speech, Josh Hawley asks, quote, can we be surprised that after years of being told they're the problem, that their manhood is the problem, more and more men are withdrawing into the enclave of idleness and pornography and video games, end quote. This is not the first and certainly not the last time that Hawley zeroes in on the problem of pornography in what many people are calling the crisis of masculinity. Cultural and economic changes have made significant impacts on how people understand their gender and in what place their gender has in their experience of the world. Hawley draws a line between liberal policies and the crisis of masculinity by claiming that the left's attack on America leads directly to an attack on men. This shows up both in his intense disavowal of porn and in his obsession with self-restraint and control. Hawley echoes the rhetoric of both anti-porn and anti-masturbation movements, as well as far-right communities, in emphasizing the importance of heterosexual relationships and fatherhood. Declining birth rates and marriage rates have fomented panic among many on the far right, and this fear is bleeding into the mainstream anxieties over the changing cultural, political, and economic landscape. Members of No Fat, No Nut November, and other anti-porn and anti-masturbation communities share a similar to Tate's supposed decadence of the contemporary moment. Easy access to pornography and other pleasures of the internet, video games, the perceived encroachment of historically marginalized communities in traditionally dominated white male spaces, has marked a downfall of masculine virtues. For these groups, the most powerful solution to the deterioration of Western manhood is in sexual restraint. McInnes points to this, stating, when you're raised in an anything goes culture, basic restraint becomes kind of a revolutionary idea. In this conjecture, the sexual restraint of the far right is couched under the innocuous structure of self-help. The far right has generally united in characterizing the changes over the past 2 decades as a result of the radical left's woke agenda, which has served to demasculinize men and overmasculinize women. Tucker Carlson's 2022 special, The End of Men, explores how testosterone levels and fertility in American men are drastically declining. This documentary is a deep dive in collapsing testosterone levels and its consequence for the country, as well as the creative ways that people are trying to counter the decline of American men. The conspiracy that the decadence brought by technological advancements and perceived sexual excess is a tactic to destroy civilization as we know it, changes what it means to be a man, a woman, and a good citizen. The ideological connections between anti-porn and anti-masturbation, self-help, and far-right communities is crystallized in Carlson's documentary, bringing all three together under the specter of societal collapse. The masculine willpower to abstain from both porn and masturbation denotes an appropriately gendered body, whereby the superior man is able to eat correctly, exercise, and control his passions. In this, the health of the body and the nation is secured. So individual successes, such as abstinence from porn or masturbation, become victories on the cultural battlefield. The destabilization of gender categories over the last decade is a strong contributing factor to the reactionary forces of anti-porn and anti-masturbation communities. Gender-critical movements arose alongside sexual restraint communities in the 2010s in response to expansions in the recognition and legal protections of gender diversity. The emphasis on gender as biologically determined and as a determiner of social roles is reflected both in the rise of gender-critical movements, the far right, and anti-porn and anti-masturbation communities. The proliferation of queer, trans, and non-binary identities in public media and popular discourse, feminist critiques of gender essentialism, and legal and social shifts towards gender and sexual inclusivity have shaped the cultural landscape over the past few decades. Debates over trans rights, pronouns, and the role of gender in institutions have exemplified these tensions. Gender-critical movements locate the decline in social degeneracy through the acceptance of trans identities. Alongside anti-porn and anti-masturbation groups, they point towards the mainstreaming of far-right ideology, specifically about sex and gender. These conversations have expanded outside of these groups, with their rhetoric and ideologies penetrating mainstream discourse. It has also reached political platforms, policies, and agendas. Project 2025's Mandate for Leadership, The Conservative Promise, written by the Heritage Foundation, has 920 pages of policy agendas designed for implementation by Donald Trump. Immediately, it names cultural Marxism as the enemy, describing Americans as under siege as never before. In the document's foreword, Kevin D. Roberts, president of the Heritage Foundation, links transness to pornography as a danger to children. How this link is made becomes clear later, as it states that pornography, quote, is manifested today in the omnipresent propagation of transgender ideology and sexualization of children, end quote. Project 2025's stance is that pornography should be outlawed in the name of protecting children, the stability of the family, and the continuation of the nation. Project 2025 names the natural loves of people as family, marriage, and work, and the unnatural loves are implied to be single motherhood, drag shows, and queerness. The idea that trans people are violating nature by transitioning reflects broader reactionary anxieties about the erosion of traditional gender norms and the perceived degeneration of society. Fascism has historically conflated the social body of the nation with the physical body of its citizens. In this sense, bodies that either characterize restraint or characterize excess become the battlegrounds on which fascism and heteropatriarchal power is fought for or resisted. Trans bodies are marked as excessive, lacking both the control and restraint necessary for what the far right considers a strong nationalist soldier. My ongoing work seeks to trace the emphasis on sexual restraint as it shows up in far right communities and how this has continued to leak into mainstream discourse under the innocuous frameworks such as self-help. Thank you so much for listening to my talk. I can't wait to hear the rest of my panelists.
Thank you, Caitlin. That was really fascinating. I can't wait to hear more when we have a Q&A. What similarities do you see between the ideologies of Hindu supremacy in India and Zionism over in Israel? And if there are similarities, what can we draw, if anything, from comparative studies between the two? Interesting question.
Thank you so much for that question. There's actually a very strong link between the two ideologies, not so much historically as we see in the present moment, but if you look at a lot of Indian headlines with regards to Israel and Palestine, despite the fact that India was one of the first modern nations to support, to not vote for the creation of Israel, in the United Nations, which would end up establishing Israel as a country, despite the fact that India's political leaders have historically shown great solidarity with the Palestinian people, it has really been kind of turned on its head after the rise of Hindu supremacy in India. And there's a very core reason for that, namely that, yes, Hindu supremacists view Palestinians as this Muslim majority group, and towards any Muslim majority group, they hold some sort of enmity towards them. The sort of genocidal hatred is almost an expression of what they wish they could do to India's Muslim minority population. But more so than that, they see Israel as an aspirational model. So just as India seeks to establish a Hindu ethno-state, or I should say India's current political leaders seek to establish this ethno-state, they see Israel and this carving out of a Jewish homeland at the expense of a vulnerable population as something to aspire to. There are many quotes that you can find that show Indian political leaders from the BJP talking about how we need to implement the Israel model in India or in the region of Kashmir, which is Muslim majority. You can see a lot of people talking about how Hindu supremacists have put their full-throated support behind Israelis on social media, spreading disinformation for them, like spreading, like joining these protests in support of Israel, because they seek that proximity to whiteness, and also because they see Israel as the model that succeeded. So as for what we can draw from comparative studies between the two, I think it's really a lesson in how, again, fascist movements tend to converge and draw support from one another.
My research, and what I think is also connected to this is this culture of individualism that we lack sort of ways of changing society, and we're working on changing structures, and then we turn towards ourselves and the things that we can control better. We have another question for Caitlin. Are you seeing any resurgence for the idea from that sphere that women should be the property of men?
Yes, although it kind of looks a little bit different now. So if you feel up for exploring the depths of the manosphere, there is like explicit language, right, that kind of calls to this property or ownership. But if we're looking maybe more at the kind of, I guess if you want to call it like the platform more broadly, this is actually being framed as a feminist notion. So I touched really lightly on it toward the end, but this movement of gender critical movements are actually a kind of feminism, although there's debate in the field about whether or not that should be called feminism. A kind of feminism that goes back to women are empowered best when they are fulfilling their roles as women, right? So as biologically defined women. And this language, particularly in tradwife spaces, but you can see this actually in a lot of spaces, is that you will be happier. The workforce, the world of work is terrible, and it does damage to the body, and it's not good for you. And so if you stay home as a woman, like, you will be healthier, you will be happier, you won't have to deal with the stressors of, capitalist labor extraction, right? And so it's kind of framed as a particular idea of like liberation for women. So the sooner you can get married and have kids, the sooner you can kind of relax. And I'm sure anybody who has kids here knows that that's not perhaps the right language to be used, but it's this idea that you'll find fulfillment, happiness, and relaxation by just letting your husband take the lead, right? And we see this a lot in Trad Wives. The rhetoric is that I've never felt more relaxed because my husband is taking the wheel, he is making the decisions, and I don't have those expectations of me, and so I can just focus on, how wonderful it is to be like a biologically defined woman. And so even though the language of property isn't quite prevalent, it's still it's kind of the underlying theme of how people are approaching what it means to kind of be a woman, and the way that belonging to a man is framed as liberatory.
Is Pasha Dashkar with the American University, who is also the director of research at Peril, the Polarization and Extremism Research and Innovation Lab. Please go ahead.
Nailed it. It's a mouthful, that the acronym, but you got it. Hello, everybody. As I was just introduced, my name is Pasha Dashkar. I'm the director of research. I'm very excited to present some new research today. My hope with this presentation is that we not only present to you some data that we've collected, but also solicit some insights from a group of really smart people who all care about the same kinds of things. And so this is a paper that hasn't had the discussion section written. Like, I'm interested in having this discussion. So the presentation is No Step on Sneck, How Digital Gun Culture Fuels Online Male Supremacy and Anti-Government Sentiments. I was co-writing this with with a senior researcher, JJ West, who was not able to be here today, but did a lot of work on this presentation as well. So really briefly, what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about the problem, we're going to talk about what we did and how we did it, what we found, and then what this all sort of means. So the problem, we'll start with male supremacy, US gun culture, and anti-government sentiments appear to converge in a distinct radicalization pathway for young men. Male grievance can spiral into anti-state violence, as is justified as a means of reclaiming rights and authority that have been stripped away from culture through cultural shifts. So men feeling aggrieved and entitled to power and privilege that they are no longer receiving or perceive as no longer receiving are feeling activated in a way that will let them, will make them more at risk for radicalization. And then previous research has indicated that men are increasingly lonely, distrustful of institutions, and skeptical of traditional civil society institutions. In particular, I think everybody has seen these statistics on Gen Z men reporting high levels of stress, emotional suppression, and perceived isolation, which are all risk factors for radicalization to extremism. Additionally, layered on top of that is that NRA and other pro-gun organizations have been promoting anti-government narratives like guns are tools for defense against this feminized, multicultural, and tyrannical state overreach. All of those are dog whistles for white supremacist and male supremacist concepts. In particular, I think the idea of a nanny state and this idea of positioning the government as like government overreach as part of a broader an attempt to emasculate Western men. That's a narrative that is out in the manosphere. Men are simultaneously experiencing who are experiencing economic, emotional, or relational instability, are more likely to buy guns or accept pro-gun arguments as a means of restoring lost masculinity. So for example, there's a really interesting research on the shift for regions where there's high levels of economic instability, where men are going from the provider mentality to the protector mentality, and what that really means for violence and for the sort of this like radicalization to anti-government groups. And then finally, the Great Replacement theory is this theory that sort of ties together on a micro level anti-Black and anti-Brown racism with, on a macro level, anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic tropes, and this kind of conspiracy theory that feminism and like the Jewish Zionist occupied government are conspiring to open borders and reduce white birth rates. So there's this positioning of men as protectors of Western values and Western culture and Western women and like white women. And so it's this kind of blending of a bunch of different types of conspiracy theories together, all of which kind of make men who are encountering this content much more vulnerable. I just want to say also, I'm currently without childcare, so if you hear babies running around in the background, that is what's going on. So what did we do? Well, I need to be part of a movement that sees the like sort of validation and we are fighting all together against this corrupt government that is tyrannically trying to control us. And then finally, protect my family. This is like, there was a lot of conversations around tying sort of violence and owning a gun and being willing to fight the government directly to familialism and this kind of like broader conspiracy around the elevation of white families and the nuclear family as a sort of the unit of measure for success in a society. And so this is like all three of these things sort of pull together this idea of I'm a man, I need to protect, like my role is to be capable of enacting violence in order to protect weaker people because men are always stronger, women and children are always weaker.
On the internet, as well as targeted e-bile, which is, well, I would say hate speech, right, targeted at women and intended to scare women, essentially, off of the internet. Great example of that is the hashtag Gamergate. Movement is a very loose term, right, but where we saw that coordinated effort against female journalists and or video game journalists in particular. The alt-right, similarly, is an online collective of loosely connected interest groups, right? So you see what I'm doing here, drawing these connections between the two, right? The alt-right, of course, it's a uniquely virtual phenomenon that grew from image boards like 4chan, and they are known for their mastery of online antagonism, which is very similar to e-bile, very much related to that.
So another important part of this research focuses on how incels understand themselves. And what's really striking is that often they position themselves not as perpetrators of violence, but as victims. So they present themselves as the traditional nice guy who were constantly overlooked by women, despite doing what they think they should be doing. They see themselves as suffering from their involuntary celibacy, and they often frame this suffering as kind of a social or even political injustice. At the same time, they co-opt language that we've seen, in traditional feminist theory, such as oppression or marginalized. They are oppressed, they're marginalized, but it's not because of systemic inequality, but because they don't have sexual access to women. So this narrative of victimhood isn't just self-pity, but it also serves a function. So it justifies their resentment, their anger, and sometimes their desire for revenge. And it also helps to create a community. It creates a shared identity, a group of men who see themselves as collectively wronged by the world that favors jets and rejects them.
So yeah, really interesting. Incel's relationship with race is interesting, to say the least. I'm currently qualitatively coding some posts right now, and let me tell you, I do need some liquid courage to get through it. But jokes aside, it's fascinating, particularly how incels express anti-Blackness, and some of it too can be self-directed as well, right? Because as we know, or probably know, right, about incels, they are ethnically diverse. So it's not just white men who are incels, right? You've got primarily Asian men, just broad, right, South Asian, East Asian men who are incels, and you have, I would say, arguably a smaller proportion of incels who are Black themselves. But this idea of Black men as aggressors, Black men as threats, right, to masculinity, representing sort of competition, right, particularly for white women, is definitely pervasive. And I see it quite a bit. And that, you know, obviously we know that incels have the Chad term, right, to the sort of broad archetype for the macho man. But they, of course, have their racialized terms for those Chads, right? And most of those racialized terms have Chad in there, with the exception of their Black term for it, which is Tyrone, right? Which, of course, is a stereotypical Black name, but also serves to broadly represent this idea of Black hypermasculinity, right? And I've seen this reiterated by, well, self-described Black men themselves in these forums, right, who resent that within, who resent that as well. So yeah, if that addresses the question.
Yeah, and I think there's I think there's a something that is really important to address here is the intersectionality within, you know, the hierarchical framework within the incel community, because you know there's a lot of white incels, but there's also a lot of other, you know, other demographic identities, and they often have these specific terms that they use to refer to themselves, rice cell, curry cell, which are very, you know, stereotypical, derogative ways of referring to yourself. And I think it's important to also address those, and to also really look at how these hierarchical and intersectionality factors play a role within incel ideology. And I think we should really look at incel ideology as part of this broader ecosystem, and not just on its own, but more part of a bigger ecosystem.
Absolutely, Simone and Jessica. The only other thing I would add to that is that there's a couple, we were talking before about the ways in which incels have co-opted feminist language. And there's some really interesting ways in which incels have co-opted, particularly incels of color, have co-opted white privilege language. So there's a term like just be white, where it's like, oh, white men are so privileged, they can get women wherever they want. Especially if you travel to Southeast Asia, women will just come flocking to you. And so there's this really interesting way, like on the subreddit AZN hate, like Asian hate, there's this like discourse around Asian women who date white men, and how this is like them being like race traitors, and how they're just captured by white privilege, like white, you know, discourse, and that if they were really loyal to their race, then they would date Asian men like me. And so there's this really interesting like co-opting of like this narrative around white privilege as a way of shaming and like harassing women of color who, you know, have the audacity to date somebody that these men don't want them to date. In short, there is a long tradition of anti-state sentiments, especially on the far right, where the sort of like notion of the tyrannical government, I mean, that comes from the Civil War, right? And so the idea of the federal government forcing certain values or morals on, you know, unwilling citizens, and the right of those citizens to stand up to that government through the Second Amendment is like baked into American political ideology. And so that is something that is like very salient, and this is what that sort of male supremacy, anti-government sentiment, that's part of what is being tapped into there, is this idea that it is like the government is forcing progressive values and a feminized kind of vision of American society, and that we need to be able to resist that, and that it is like the duty of the Western male to resist this kind of feminist, like Jewish conspiracy to like strip us of that ability or those values. In terms of it's a great point about the sort of this fetishization of private property in America. It's like so salient, and this was really emerged a lot in our research on the home invasion stuff, where it's like they're dying for the opportunity to kill people who violate their private property rights. It's like, if you come onto my property, I ought to have the right to do anything to you. And there's no limit to the kind of violence I can inflict as a result of you violating my private property. I think it's something deeply American. I mean, not that it's not true of other Western countries and other Western cultures, but it is particularly true in America that there is this like, it plays into the sort of speaking to Jessica's research on the sort of myths and the historicization of this. It plays into this idea of like king of the castle, head of the household, that sort of broad masculine narrative around, I am the sovereign of my private property, and if you violate that, I have the right to take your life. And when you layer on top of that guns and this like sort of easy means through which you can kill people, I think there's like, it really sort of becomes very salient there.
Interesting.
I mean, we've seen it. I know this is slightly different, but manosphere adjacent. I mean, with say, J.K. Rowling, right, and her anti-trans rhetoric, right, which is very much manosphere adjacent, given its biological essentialist view of gender, right. We've seen her very quick descent into more alt-right sort of ideas, right. And that's not necessarily because she was alt-right to begin with, or that these ideas are fundamentally alt-right necessarily, right? But this idea that I mentioned earlier, right, this idea of supremacy, and with her it's complicated because she's a woman, right? But this idea of supremacy, this idea of wanting to retain some sense of traditionalism, we'll say, right, is something that in both camps is ever present, which I would say inevitably causes them to influence one another. And
I think I want to address this from a really specifically US perspective, which is to say that the notion of free speech and free speech absolutism in America pulls a lot of disparate groups and individuals into this kind of radicalized space. I think, Simone, you were talking about J.K. Rowling, but I also am thinking about like Jordan Peterson or Dave Chappelle, these people who are really rich, really famous, really powerful. And when they receive even a modest amount of backlash on social media, they like spiral. And part of it is that they have this deep entitlement to this notion that I should be able to say anything, no matter how hateful, no matter how offensive. And that's my right as an American, my constitutional right. And so under the guise of free speech absolutism, what I think is happening is that often there's an appeal, especially for young people, especially young men, there's like a kind of edginess that comes from like, I'll say anything. I interviewed the founder of the incels.is website, and one of the things that he said, but when he talked about what appealed to him initially about incel forums, was he was like, the language, they just say anything. And it was to him this notion that, well, if you don't like what's being said on the incel forums, then you just don't like the world, right? Like that in his mind, the internet is a tabula rasa, it is a blank slate, and that what manifests on these forums or platforms or websites is just reflective purely of the thoughts and feelings of the people. Never mind that these places are moderated, never mind that you will get kicked out of an incel forum if you tell people that you are attractive and it'll get better for you, don't worry. Like, in his mind, the toxicity is a one-to-one of what's going on in the general public. And so I think that this idea of free speech and this kind of under the guise of free speech trying to justify and defend hate speech, I think really pulls in a lot of disparate people. And all of a sudden, somebody like Dave Chappelle, who has been incredibly articulate about sort of the brutality that Black communities in America face, and talks really eloquently about racism, is able to, on a dime, flip when he's challenged about his complete ignorance about trans issues. And he'll die on the hill of, I ought to be able to make the worst, dumbest trans jokes because that's my right as an American to my free speech.
I have a lot of thoughts on this. So I think often a lot of what I talked about was kind of what young men are looking for and why they're drawn to the manosphere. And I will say that, like, anytime I was watching Jordan Peterson on Joe Rogan yesterday, and there's kind of right-wing fissures happening right now after that conversation. So I'd encourage people who are interested in analyzing kind of breakdowns in the manosphere to go check that out. But if you just look at the top comments, everyone's like, say what you will about Jordan Peterson. But after I listened to him and his 12 steps of life, I was able to like get out of bed and stop being depressed, and I found a wife and blah, blah, blah. So like, I think a lot of people, like men, attribute, the sort of generic self-help stuff around making your bed and drinking water to him helping them through that process. But at the same time, like, obviously Jordan Peterson is undergirded by this red pill ideology, and that like, women are inferior to you. And so while there's like certain pieces of the manosphere around self-help and motivation and lifestyle that can genuinely have you can see genuine short-term progress in your just lived reality, at the end of the day, like, so much of the what the algorithm is boosted by is sort of the sensationalized extreme content around gender. And so that's what's really concerning about it. But I think I would push media and representation in the media about the manosphere after post-adolescence to be less about like the incel who has the hit list of a number of girls, to be focusing on how mainstream a lot of this content is becoming. And it's not just the most like deepest end of the funnel radicalized men that we should be worried about, but it's this whole radicalization pipeline and funnel that is really like undergirds a lot of just mainstream cultural content that we should be like paying attention to, rather than just sort of Alex Manassian is obviously horrible, but just focusing on those like one flashpoint instances rather than the broader social mainstream context where young men are gaining like self-help progress from, is really important to develop counter narratives and push back against.
I guess I would probably have some things to say, speaking specifically to incels and kind of touching on a lot of your points. It has to be multi-level, but I think we really need to be engaging more at the school level, at preventative stage. For me, a lot of the people I was looking at in incel forums, while these were designed for over 18s, were clearly children. And I think we need to be having quite frank conversations and producing media literacy within side school environments to actually teach young boys how to navigate this absolutely crazy space they're being exposed to. Because I think we forget sometimes that a lot of the early ideas around patriarchy are installed at the childhood level. I think Bell Hooks says like patriarchy mutilates the boy, and I think she's absolutely spot on. We need to kind of completely rethink the way that we teach personal health and social education, at least in the UK and other kind of international contexts, to really make sure that we're giving young boys, and also, as you say, bringing girls into the conversation around consent and around gender and around how we kind of navigate different ways of seeing ourselves and how we interact with each other.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Ellie, for sharing. Yeah, thanks for your facilitation, Ellie.
Thank you.
Oh shit, hang on one sec. Does he have boobs? Did that male feminist have tits? Did I like I wasn't just imagining that, right? Like that was like, What the fuck did I just see? Can someone rewind? Like, you guys have access to the stream. Can someone just go? What the fuck? What the fuck was that? That was the most shocking thing. I thought that was a guy. And then he leans back and like giant set of tits. Well, you never know what you're gonna get on Spy Stream. You never know. I really thought that was a man, and no, that was not a man. That was a they/them feminist with that looks like a man and then has tits. Apparently, what the fuck?
So next we have Amelia. Amelia Sandow is a master's student at the University of Toronto in the social justice education program, as well as a junior high school teacher. She is presenting a paper on the influence of Andrew Tate in North American classrooms. Her paper is called Trying to Talk White Teenage Boys Off the Alt-Right Ledge and Other Impacts of Masculinist Influencers on Teachers. And Amelia, feel free to take it away.
Thank you, CJ. Can everybody see my slides? It's all good? Okay, sweet. Hello, everybody. Today I am going to be presenting work that looks at the impacts of networked misogyny on teachers and in the classroom. This work was done collaboratively with Dr. Luke Cousineau, who is unfortunately not able to join us today. Okay. So yeah, this presentation comes from a forthcoming paper titled Trying to Talk White Male Teenagers Off the Alt-Right Ledge and Other Impacts of Masculinist Influencers on Teachers, which will appear in the journal Gender and Education shortly. In this paper, my colleague and I discuss the impacts of masculinist influencers, specifically Andrew Tate, on teachers. We frame our discussion using masculinities and Deleuzian theory, but for the purpose of this presentation today, I will be focusing on the findings as well as the immediate and long-term impacts of these findings. If you are interested in the more theory-heavy side of things, I encourage you to go read that paper once it comes out. So as a teacher myself, I was particularly interested in this topic, but the timeline of Tate is also crucial context to our interest in this research. So to give a brief overview of Andrew Tate, in case anyone was able to escape his name for the last 3 years and is unfamiliar, we came to this research during what we can only hope was the peak of the Tate era. In July 2022, Tate was the most searched name on Google. Shortly thereafter, he was banned from nearly all mainstream social media platforms, so Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, for violating their policies, but has since been reinstated on many of these platforms. Our interest in this research was then renewed in December 2022 when he was arrested in Romania on various criminal charges. And then you may have also seen Tate's name in the news recently. Post-research, he has been in jail, released under house arrest, fled to the US, where he was immediately accused of rape, and then returned to Romania. So it is within this context of Tate's fame and ubiquity that the 2022-2023 school year began in North America, and we began our research, asking how teachers would be affected by the changing discourses of gender, power, and influence brought about by the misogyny in the social media algorithms of young people. Our research used data from Reddit, specifically the Our Teachers subreddit, which has over 1 million subscribers and serves a function akin to a virtual teacher's lounge. So it's a place where teachers discuss issues of teaching, share experiences, and seek advice. We used a custom Python script to collect 2,300 comments and posts from June 2022 to February 2023, where Andrew Tate was mentioned. So the filtering we did included Andrew Tate's name, as well as other popularized names used to refer to the influencer. We then inductively coded content using in vivo software to pull the dominant themes. So the three major findings that we discuss in this paper include: what does the discourses of misogyny championed by Tate do to teachers as individuals and professionals? How does it impact the classroom environment for students and teachers? And then lastly, we look at how teachers are responding to the Tate phenomenon in their classrooms, which is a divided case, with many wanting to confront the issue while others feel quite dismissive. As I discuss the themes of our paper, my slides depict some quotes from our research. The quotes appear in one of two ways. So the first of which are those that are just regular font. These appear verbatim, and either we got consent from the user to use their words, or their account has been deleted, and therefore their words cannot be traced back to a profile. Other quotes appear in italics. We were not able to get in touch with the poster of these comments, so they have been paraphrased using AI software to prevent the reverse Google search of these comments and the ability to trace them back to specific individuals. We thought a lot about ethics around conducting research on public social media forums, and ultimately decided this was the most ethical practice, although this is quite a contested topic within social media research. Okay, so the most prominent of the discussions in our teachers about Tate's influence was the direct impacts on the teachers themselves, especially on women identifying teachers or those who present as women in their comments. Many of the teachers in our data express struggling with classroom management because of how young men are expressing themes from the sexist media they are consuming and the ways this problematizes relationships of authority for them. So one teacher states, this is the quote at the top there, "The majority of them are 13-year-old boys, and I'm a 23-year-old woman. So to expect any respect at all from them is a pipe dream, especially considering the online cultural phenomenon Andrew Tate has become." And not only is it impacting women teachers professionally, but we also see comments from users that demonstrate the impacts of this rhetoric on teachers personally. So boys are feeling bold enough to make, quote, lewd and sexual comments towards their teachers, as seen in the last quote on this slide, which also points starkly to the systemic nature of misogyny in some schools, as the administrator brushes off this incident as boys will be boys. Given that administrators are teachers' only real defense against systemic issues, when these individuals are buying into or perpetuating them, their impacts are enhanced. So then there is this misogynistic double bind where women teachers experience gendered marginalization from students as well as their institutions of employment. The next theme we explore in our paper is the impact of Tate on classroom dynamics. Given that pushing back against public misogyny can carry personal or professional consequences for teachers, some teachers suggest the possibility of leaving pushback to female students, as demonstrated by the user on the top of this, the top quote there of this slide, who states, "I let girls in my class eviscerate the kid who brought him up once and haven't heard from another tater tot since." But this strategy of peer approach relies on a classroom dynamic that permits and encourages students to speak their minds, as well as teachers' confidence that students are able to engage with the topic and each other in a way where everyone stays safe, a strategy that may not be possible in every classroom. Other teachers worry about the threat this poses to feelings of safety in schools, especially for girl students. Andrew Tate's popularity and consequently the spread of his rhetoric is clearly perceived as a threat to safety in schools, both in the way his ideas are parroted by male students and through the direct impacts teachers see on themselves and perceive on female students. Teachers of all grade levels find themselves at the front lines of changing social and cultural dynamics. This trending rise of misogynistic rhetoric is something that many educators see as a new and deeply concerning phenomenon. One teacher states, seemingly 90% of my work is trying to talk white teenage boys off the alt-right ledge. While being on the front lines, teachers also represent a group with significant cultural influence, given their hundreds of hours of direct student contact time in a year and presence in their communities, and therefore may feel increasingly compelled to take action. While many teachers on the subreddit express uncertainty about how to respond to Andrew Tate talk, it's clear this is not something most were prepared for in their teacher training. Personally, I don't recall any guidance on this in my own education program, which I did during the peak of the Tate era. And I imagine that's the case for most teachers in North America. Complicating the issue is the expectation that educators remain apolitical and neutral in their teaching. This makes it even more challenging to address topics that are politically charged, but also socially urgent. Teachers were divided in their approach to the issue. Some decided it is best to simply not respond to Andrew Tate-related discourse at all, believing that Tate's views are not explicitly problematic or dangerous on their own. But on the other side are users who believe this rhetoric needs to be confronted, with teachers offering ideas for how this might be done. In confronting this behavior, teachers send a message about which ideals and expectations are to be upheld in their classrooms, with the hope that, given teachers' significant influence on their students, students will carry these values as active participants in society. So to offer some concluding thoughts, there are significant immediate impacts as well as long-term impacts resulting from the influence of Andrew Tate and similar masculinist grifter content. The users of our teachers show us that there are significant and direct effects of misogyny and online male supremacy in the classroom and on teachers, which adds to the growing body of international research with similar conclusions. There are also direct impacts on teachers' abilities and/or desire to remain as classroom educators, as countering male supremacy becomes a complex part of their job description that few feel trained or equipped to navigate. Along with attacks on individuals, users clearly demonstrate that there are reasons for concern in the safety and well-being of students and school environments as a result of the Tate phenomenon. We should be alarmed, but not at all surprised by the many examples of overt misogyny shared in this presentation, given the longstanding precedent for how women teachers are treated by boys in the classroom and the well-documented resurgence of male supremacist powers in North America. Overt and public expressions of anti-women, anti-feminist, and violent misogynist feelings are the most common precursors to violence. The ability to express these views in public with little or no consequence empowers and emboldens the expressions. Examples of teachers appealing to administrators for support and receiving none, or behaviors being excused as boys will be boys, are excellent examples of this phenomenon from our research. The fact that we can identify these instances, understand that they're increasing in frequency, and attribute them, at least in part, to the digital content of a small group of influence peddlers or even a single person, is cause for concern and alarm. While perhaps easily dismissed as the immature actions of boys, to make the choice to ignore or downplay the profound impacts of deep misogyny in the elementary, middle, and high school setting does a deep disservice to equity work and the role of schools in creating a better future. Schools have always taught more than the curriculum, implicitly teaching things such as values and social norms. But when progressive social norms are overcoded by neo-traditional male supremacist ideas about gender and power, we are in significant danger of re-emerging threats to social equity and personal safety. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wow, that's really interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I will definitely have a few questions about that, considering my current work also deals with Andrew Tate. So great to see more people talking about the Tate-ster.
Specifically in this study, what I looked at was the prevalence of profile pictures, how profile pictures on these websites are used to communicate ideology. Within more mainstream outlets, profile pictures are marked as a primary mode of information communication and ideological transmission. So if you look at Facebook, researchers are often using profile pictures as ways to catalog how people feel about their identity, gender roles, and political affiliations, and how those are broadcast. I was excited about this methodology or this approach because I hadn't seen any study of this kind done or replicated on incels or on any other misogynistic forum. But my bubble was very quickly popped when I realized I would not be able to do the study that I wanted to do, because many of the incels, when they're creating their profile pictures, are engaging in something called Derridian deconstructionism. In my conceptualization of this project, I intended to conduct a visual content analysis of 25 incels.is profile pictures. However, in the early stages of coding those images, which I'll show you very shortly, I realized that I didn't have a full understanding of the images that I was coding, and many of their meanings felt obscure and symbolized something deeper than the denotative meanings typically attributed to their elements. So rather than attempting to bypass this major roadblock or just scrap the project entirely, I elected to turn a critical lens to this element of obscurity and embrace its Derridian postmodernity. By denaturing and reassembling the elements in their profile pictures, incels are engaging in deconstructivism. Another challenge to this, when we are considering what it means to be an incel, is that we're only oftentimes able to engage with them with their front stage persona, meaning the person that they are presenting themselves to be on the public stage, where they know they're going to be watched, where they know they're going to be observed. So as an outsider to the incel community, this sort of decentralized play that the incels are engaging in with their profile pictures means that I'm not able to fully grasp the meaning of each profile picture. And as someone that's lurked in this forum for about 3 years, I'm not unacquainted with incel ideology. However, I'm only observing them in what Irving Goffman describes as the front stage. I don't live the embodied existence of an incel. I don't view the same programs as them. I don't frequent their closed discords or connect with them across multiple platforms. And as a population marked by a real lack of desire to speak to researchers, my analysis can only get so close to the truth of being an incel through observation. So instead of attempting to categorize this content of the profile pictures, the following analysis categorized my lack of understanding and how the incels are unintentionally or perhaps intentionally obscuring the ideology, and what I think we can take from that as researchers. So I selected one thread for the following analysis, and I analyzed the profile pictures within it using Braun and Clark's 2006 thematic analysis guidelines. I selected this thread because it's entitled, "Why do you guys think a Chad that I know wrote?" And it has a couple terms within it that are pretty localized to incels. A Chad being someone that's a highly attractive male presenting figure, and roped being used as shorthand for suicide. I selected this thread because it's pretty banal, and it was, when I did this analysis, it was only 2 days old. So I thought it'd be a good sample of the current slice of incel culture. And its title solicited feedback from users. So I was hoping I would get some answers or some responses, see people responding to the thread whose photos I could analyze. So I categorized those 25 photos based upon my own understanding of the ideology embedded within them. 7 of them I categorized as straightforward, pictured here. I categorized an image as straightforward if I, as a white female non-incel with a high degree of digital literacy, was able to decode the profile's central meaning without conducting additional internet searches for clarification. And there were 3 themes amongst the pictures. First, popular culture, violence, and a lot of them were system generated, like that G there. It's important to note that not all incels choose to put a profile picture up. Some of them are just generated by the system, the G being the first letter of that user's username. One commonality amongst these ones was the appropriation of mainstream popular culture. For example, you'll see a couple of photos here that use the Joker as a popular figure. And audiences, especially incels, often kind of take up for the Joker because within the movie, especially the Joker 2019, Joaquin Phoenix's character is shown to make really well-intentioned but poorly received attempts at navigating modern society. And alongside these pop culture references are what many of us would assume, or perhaps expect to see from incel profile photos. Violence. Some of them, one of them being in the bottom row, the center photo there, one of the Columbine school shooters, Dylan Klebold, dressed in a black trench coat. And by invoking Klebold's image, an outsider is led to assume that the individual endorses or empathizes with the Columbine shooter on some level. Seems clear enough. Let's move forward to ones that, to me, were a little less clear. Maybe they would be more clear to you folks. Who knows? So what I coded as ambiguous, 13 of the 25 images. These were images that I had, there was at least one cultural reference in here that I did not understand how it connected to the incel ideology. So to gain a more informed perspective, I uploaded these to Google Images, sifted through the source context, and these searches yielded some insight into how each profile picture's intended meaning connected with what it means to be an incel. So for example, one user elected to represent themselves using an image of Frieza from Dragon Ball Z. It's in the center row on the far left. I was able to easily ascertain Frieza's identity from Google Images, but I'd never seen Dragon Ball Z. I don't know how or if Frieza's relevant to the incel cause, but after consulting a professor, I learned that Frieza is notoriously racist, and he frequently refers to members of the Saiyan race as monkeys, which can be viewed as a reflection of our world, where racists in America frequently refer to African-American people as monkeys. However, there are other reasons why incels may have a particular affinity for Frieza, and I looked up a thread associated with Frieza and entitled "Frieza is based in Black-pilled." Users applauded him for executing soldiers in a specific scene that mock him for his short height. And some of the incels in that thread reported being bullied for their height, so they vicariously enjoyed watching Frieza take vengeance against those who would antagonize him. And so without speaking to the account's owner, I don't know what exactly this is trying to convey. I don't know if they're potentially conveying racism. I don't know if they're conveying violence. I don't know if they're conveying feelings of inadequacy about their own appearance. And although these basic internet searches allowed me to glean some insight into the meanings embedded within these profile pictures, I can't say with certainty that I'm receiving the messages as their senders intended them to be conveyed. The only way to confirm or deny these interpretations is by establishing a dialogue with the profile picture's creator. And even then, there's no guarantee that the users would tell me the truth, because where's the shitposting fun in that? The ideology within these profile pictures is unintentionally obscured to those who are familiar with the normative cultural canon. And the final category that I categorized in my thematic analysis was obscure, which was 5 of the photos. And one of them, the 4th photo there, in case you're having a good day and you don't want it ruined, I blocked off the photo of the cartel execution that's beneath it, but there's a photo of a cartel execution beneath it. I coded 5 of the 25 profile pictures as obscure and repeated the same procedure I mentioned for the ambiguous category. I reverse image searched these elements of the photos and conducted relevant keyword searches to better understand them. I'll only go into detail on one of these profile pictures. It's the one on the far right that has Ryan Gosling, a popular actor, dressed in Nazi regalia. And he looks to be set up against a lightning bolt background, but this is subject to individual interpretation, since Gosling is kind of obscuring half the bolt. The only connection I could find between Ryan Gosling and Nazism is his role in the 2001 film The Believer, which was his first leading role, and he portrays a young Jewish man who identifies as a neo-Nazi. And that's about as far as it goes, but I theorize that maybe they are invoking this image of Ryan Gosling in reference to a portrayal of Ken in Barbie, where recent misogynistic memes seem to take the soy boy, quote unquote, meme and superimpose it into Nazi regalia, as you saw in the previous slide. I don't really have a good answer, and I think I don't necessarily need to, and that's the point of this analysis. Its obscurity is meant to create an in-group and an out-group. So once I shifted this paper's focus to obscurity, I did so with the working hypothesis that the users who were on the forum for the longest would have the most obscure profile pictures. and since they spent the most time enmeshed in the incel echo chamber. And so after coding each of the 25 photos for its level of obscurity, I measured the amount of time in days between when each user created their account and when the forum thread was posted. And within each category, straightforward, ambiguous, obscure, and the total, I calculated the mean and median account age. And the results confirm that users whose profile pictures I coded as straightforward and spent significantly less time on incels.is than users whose photos I coded as ambiguous or obscure were there a lot longer. The mean age of account in the ambiguous and obscure groups is nearly 5 times greater than the mean in the straightforward user. So interestingly, there's less temporal difference between the ambiguous and obscure users, which may indicate that the distinction between the two categories is really arbitrary and unnecessary. So what can we really take from this, aside from the fact that I didn't understand a lot of what was going on with these profile pictures? Well, the first thing is that we can see from previous research, many incels report feeling like they must conform to the ideals of mainstream society in their daily interactions. They feel pressured to hide any shred of themselves that goes against the cultural canon from the people they socialize with on a day-to-day basis. Yet we know they deeply yearn to be seen and understood by those they perceive to be similar to them online. In accomplishing this, online subcultures often communicate using symbols and signs, which we call mimetic signifiers, that will only make sense to those who are enmeshed within those spaces. Incels understand that their insurgent ideology means that their communities are being surveilled by law enforcement officials, academics, and other non-incel onlookers. They have to walk this really tenuous line of making their organization easily found by potential members, but also shielded from those who seek to critique and dismantle their community. To do this, they communicate through cultural symbols and references, memes, that maybe the average internet user won't understand. The previous analysis exemplifies how the layers of obscurity that incels have collectively crafted to shield their communities are working against researchers in some ways. As a Gen Z researcher, I have a pretty high degree of internet literacy, and I'm pretty familiar with mainstream meme culture. And I've been passively observing various threads on this website for nearly 3 years. However, I understood less than a third of the profile pictures on this thread. And as an observer, I didn't have the cultural knowledge necessary to decode these messages. And I would hedge a guess that, honestly, some incels wouldn't either. This contextual knowledge embedded within each profile picture sits at the intersection of a number of co-cultures that not all incels may even understand. Not all actions taken by incels are motivated by the incel ideology or are representative of the incel ideology.
So instead of trying to counter misogynistic ideas, alternative narratives seek to talk with men about the real causes of their problems and encourage them to join movements that aim to tackle these causes. So core to alternative narratives is working through joint understandings of the world. This means beginning with a recognition of the kernel of truth of men's complaints. That means that recognizing that something, probably their alienation and isolation from the world, or their lack of sense of future, is a genuinely felt feeling, even if we don't agree with how they're then channeling those feelings. So alternative narratives then work to build work to find and build an alternative understanding from where these feelings come from, which social structures may be to blame for the problems and the solutions available to them. So instead of blaming feminism, we might be able to say, well, we understand your problems, and actually the cause of this might be rampant capitalism, and that is the cause. It's not feminism that is causing these issues. And this is all based in empathy and understanding. Instead of attacking people for being inclined to manosphere ideas, we need to start understanding where their concerns come from. So approaches such as this are already happening in the manosphere spaces.
I'm just going to share my slides. Hopefully you can see that. Great, thank you. And yeah, thanks so much, Anne, for that introduction. I'd just like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I present to you today. I'm calling from unceded Wurundjeri land in the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So my presentation today is a bit conceptual, and it's an opportunity for me to share some growing ideas that I have been working on over the last 6-ish months as part of my PhD research. So also really welcome any feedback and thoughts anyone might have today. So I'm going to be talking today about what posthuman feminism might offer the ways we think about white male supremacism and its grip on our more than human world.
I'll be looking particularly at white male supremacist violence, which I imperfectly classify here as far right, and limit my focus to a sort of a West post-Enlightenment context. So most of you familiar, if anyone is familiar already with posthuman feminism, you may know it's the sum of many parts. It moves nomadically between disciplines and domains of knowledge to trouble notions of the human through a more than human lens, in order to better engage with the troubles of today, so that we might construct, as Rosie Bredossi puts it, social horizons of hope. For today's purposes, I'm going to focus on one particular component of posthuman feminism, that is the idea of human exceptionalism. To do this, I'm going to briefly touch on the background and what led me to think about white male supremacist violence through a posthuman feminist lens. And then I'll move to focus on this idea of human exceptionalism, which I hope to demonstrate through the case study of the Christchurch terror attack before concluding. One of the many contributions male supremacism research makes, I think, is that it reminds us that male supremacist ideas that influence acts of far-right violence, for instance, are themselves not exceptional ideas, though they ought to be, because male supremacism is embedded in the structures of normative Western patriarchal societies a lot of the time. And I apply a similar reasoning to what I go on to discuss as human supremacist ideas, where far-right violence is informed by taking for granted notions of human superiority that are embedded in everyday life. So with this in mind, I want to move on to speaking a bit about the background to today's presentation, which I mentioned was my PhD research. I'm focused on exploring whether misogyny informs the way counter-violent extremism organizations determine which acts of mass violence are constitutive of terrorism and which are not. In my research, I'm concerned with making sense of why acts of far-right violence, often guided by violent misogynist ideas and motives, have so often not been classified as terrorism by the relevant organization. And I hypothesize that this may be because the misogynist norms identified in far-right motives may also be shaping these organizations. In this effort, I use posthuman feminism as my conceptual framework, as a way to think about terrorism, violent extremism and counter-violent extremism, misogyny, white and male supremacism, and the disciplines that seek to make sense of it all as entangled and relational to each other and others in the more than human world. And I take this approach out of a keen interest in the dynamics of othering framings that persist in some of the dominant literature in security studies and terrorism studies, media and policy, which often maintain a view of these violent actors and so-called extremists as other, beyond the social fray, exceptional, one-off, or as Anna Catherine Rothermel and Megan Kelly insightfully note, approaches that are still caught up in the naming of gendered vulnerabilities without naming the systems they rely upon. These framings often produce a dichotomy whereby white male violent actors are explained as bad apples in an otherwise stable context, in contrast to non-white male actors whose violence is often pathologized as an inevitable outcome of unstable non-Western contexts or cultures. And such biases contribute to a logic that positions terrorism and extremism along an us and them binary, establishing the terrorist as the racialized, gendered and sexualized embodiment of them, and terrorism the consequence of the influences embedded in other cultures, whilst us is animated by the embodiment of Western hegemonic man and embedded in post-Enlightenment ideas of liberal modern society. And thanks to a number of academics and researchers, particularly working from an intersectional feminist perspective, many of these logics have been revealed and critiqued for treating white and male supremacist violence as a sort of aberration, rather than as the violent articulation of certain entrenched biases that inform the everyday. And it was as I was sort of leaning into this literature that my focus shifted towards wanting to better understand why these binaries and hierarchies of entrenched male and white power continue to be sustained. And it was that led me to explore the role of anthropos and ideas of human exceptionalism. So I'm going to make the case here that the hierarchical practices separating humans from other humans is sustained by an interlocking system of domination, that is, human supremacy, which separates humans from non-humans and serves the interests of white male supremacism, to which it is inextricably bound. In other words, I consider the possibility that male and white supremacism is so deeply interlinked with and sustained by practices of human supremacy that tackling one, whilst its supremacist others stand, may limit the opportunity to fully dismantle any. Addressing this, and in its transdisciplinary theorizing and particular engagement with ecofeminist and indigenous perspectives, Posthuman feminism reveals the workings of human supremacy as underwriting white male supremacism. In this combined man-anthropos framework, both human and non-human beings are constrained by the exclusionary ideas of man as the universal subject that speaks for all humans, and humans as the exceptional species that speaks for all beings. I suggest that much work has advanced our understanding of the damage and exclusion wrought by male and white supremacist systems and thinking, but we are less attuned to the co-occurrence of human supremacism, the function of anthropos in this man-anthropos framework, and how its own exclusionary and hierarchical ideas contribute to these systems and norms, as well as the worldviews of far-right actors. In other words, in this man-anthropos grip on the Western world, we are alive to the exclusionary effects of man, but what of anthropos? Whilst human supremacism or human exceptionalism is not only a post-human feminist concept, post-human feminism places it in a convergence with male supremacism and sort of defines it as the systems and beliefs that support a view of humans as superior to non-human beings, and that nature, constituted by a biophysical world of vital, self-organizing material beings, is entirely separate from culture. This thinking has it that humans, or structures claiming to act in the name of human advancement and societal modernization, are entitled to plunder nature as a resource for the needs of man. Such an extraction-centric attitude assumes not only that nature and the environment is a limitless resource for certain humans, but that extracting from it is a necessary condition of modernization and civilizing processes, which measures human progress by its distance from nature, a view that fundamentally obscures both our embeddedness and indebtedness to nature. Human supremacism is entangled with male supremacism in this man-anthropos framework, in that the belief in the human right to dominate nature intersects with and reinforces the belief in man's right to dominate women and those constituted as other. This entwinement expands the categories of exclusion thus that the others positioned in negative difference to man-anthropos are both human and non-human. They are the human others whose gender, ethnicity, and sexuality, among other factors, are positioned in negative difference to the white Eurocentric male norm that has come to represent the human. And they are the non-human others who, in their difference to humans, have come to constitute lesser beings. I note how some of this literature overlooks that this radical instrumentalizing is a condition of human supremacist thinking. By this I mean, Tarrant views nature through a hierarchical lens as objects in subjugation to the needs of white man, views that are not unlike contemporary neo-imperial or neoliberal logics in economics. In this taken for granted human exceptionalism, Tarrant embeds his white male supremacist belief systems. In other words, ecofascism is positioned as being born out of white male supremacist ideas, rather than as resulting from conditions of human supremacist thinking that facilitate ecofascist possibilities. And drawing on Sid Simpson and Kate Cheever's work, I argue that in failing to account for a human supremacist lens explicitly, the material relations that boundary police humans and non-human beings and which facilitate eco-fascist ideas are left intact. The consequence of this is that we are not necessarily troubling the boundaries established and exploited by Tarrant himself between the human and non-human, or considering how these boundaries are implicated in the other boundaries Tarrant seeks to enforce between humans and other humans. Overlooking how Tarrant's human supremacism is embedded with his white male supremacism means we miss an important piece of the puzzle. By only seeing his human-centric supremacisms, we reinforce the human exceptionalist lens Tarrant himself relies on. So just to wrap up, I want to sort of answer, why does any of this matter? Why does making visible a human exceptionalist or human supremacist framework that operates in an intersecting way with white male supremacist frameworks matter? Well, firstly, I hope to make clear that by accounting for human supremacy, I seek to draw attention to another vector of discrimination, one that decenters, but certainly in no way denies, its human impact. And I take the position that in this more than human world, there is not much that warrants a human-only perspective, because there is not much that exists untouched or external to the wider environment in which non-humans inhabit. The God trick is just that, a trick. We are all radically immanent to one another in this together, though we are not one and the same. I also take the view that in our omission of non-human beings in analyses, we're reinforcing the belief that humans are superior and separate from nature and non-human beings, and that these non-human beings are lesser, because we often fail to engage with the impact violence like tyrants has on these non-human beings, even as we operate from within a context of climate catastrophe that lets us know we are neither separate from nature nor these non-human beings. In other words, that it's not just the role of environmental and natural sciences, for example, to be alert to the effects of non-human others and the human supremacy that denies their affective capacities. This human supremacy is shaping how we understand far-right violence, and it's shaping the worldviews of those who carry out far-right violence, and it's deeply interwoven with the structures of white and male supremacism that rely on it as a system of domination to legitimize its own functioning. These systems are not separate but overlapping. The objectification of non-human beings and their instrumentalizing for human needs is deeply reminiscent of male supremacist thinking that objectifies women and positions them in labor to the needs of hegemonic man. Can we really dismantle one supremacy that relies on the othering of humans perceived to be worth less than because they are different from man, while maintaining and legitimizing the subjugation of non-human others, which human supremacy sustains? And do we want to? So I want to end by tentatively advocating for intersectional approaches to the study of white and male supremacism to include the effects and impact of human supremacism on such man-made concerns. Because if we are engaging with systems of domination, we should engage with the entire architecture of domination as it functions in this multi-species world, where we are one species entangled with many. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miranda. That was very enlightening. We will be opening the chat for questions. So feel free to drop any questions that you have for our panelists, or just raise your hand on the screen and we will let you speak. So we have a question in the chat for all the panelists. Can you all comment on the role that capitalism plays in creating and facilitating incel culture?
To get back at what Simon was saying about aggrieved entitlement and the conditions that create in our society where it's able to thrive, capitalism is a major one. I think a big piece of contemporary masculinity is the ability to provide for the family, put food on the table, and that's a big ideal within a lot of masculinity studies. And if somebody doesn't have the actual ability to do that, whether by the wage gaps increasing, things are becoming more expensive, and they don't have the same ability to provide for a stay-at-home life for all of their children, then there's a cultural script that you are less successful at being a man in these individuals' eyes. And I think that absolutely plays into the need for support for wounded masculinity that these forums sometimes serve as.
Simon, you wanted to add something?
I could talk about this for hours and hours and hours. So I want to talk about maybe I'll just say a couple of things. I think one of the really big ones, and I think it's really important to understand that there has been changes in how capitalism has operated, particularly with the rise of neoliberalism, and then also in the last 10 years since the global financial crisis has changed quite a lot. There's a couple of things that I think are relevant. In previous versions of capitalism, particularly in places like the United States, there was always this idea of the American dream, which is the idea that you can, if you work hard enough, you can do exactly what Diana was talking about, which is get a job where you can provide a stable income for a family. Often the man could earn enough for an entire family, and that was the dream, the idea of the white picket fence house, those types of things. Now, one of the things that has really broken down in the last 10 or 20 years is that dream, and that sense that that dream is achievable. And you see this quite a lot. We're entering the world in which there's generations who are more pessimistic about the future than generations beforehand. The polling is very clear on that. or people who are have a sense that they'll be worse off than the generation before them, which is the first time in many, many generations that sense is there. And that is really crushing that American dream. And I think that one of the things I talk about in my book a bit is the sense of nihilism that comes from that. And I think nihilism is such an important part of incel culture. A sense that there is no purpose, there is no point, there is no future. And that creates a lot of this really violent rhetoric, because if there's no future, then and there's no point, then it doesn't matter if we're violent to people, because there is no point. It doesn't matter. There's no values. There's nothing to really to live by. So there's no moral grounding that keeps us here anymore. And Wendy Brown has a great quote, which I can't remember exactly, but it's something like, if white men can't control the world, then they may as well destroy it. And I think that nihilistic sentiment is really, really very a core part of the manosphere. And it's driven by the failures of capitalism, where that American dream that is, you get told, oh, this is the belief that this is, you grow up with this belief that this is what it's going to be like. And then you realize it's not, that everything you've been told is wrong. Then of course, for many people, that leads to this kind of nihilistic, nothing is real sentiment. So I think that's a really important part of what capitalism has done. And the second thing I just say is briefly as well is, capitalism, particularly neoliberalism, creates this kind of individualistic sense of the world as well, that you're all in it for yourselves and you've got to compete. And you compete to achieve the American dream or the Australian dream or whatever we want to call it. And again, I think this is less important in incel culture, but it's very important in places like pick-up artist culture and men going their own way, where it becomes very individualistic. This is the way that we will solve the problem, is I will work on myself and I will work on, I will go to the gym, or I will become, I'll buy things and that will be the solution. But again, it doesn't result in real solutions. And so it creates this perpetual cycle in which people are like, I'm going to the gym and I still am not happy. I'm buying new things and I'm still not happy. And so they come to the manosphere for even more. What's the next thing I can do? What's the next thing I can do? And it actually perpetuates this problem. So a lot of manosphere culture, well, I think it's reacting against the sort of what's happened in capitalism is also being perpetuated by capitalism. And it sort of is really embedded in capitalist ideals. And in turn, this creates further problems for these men.
Yeah, absolutely. And both your comments make me think of Bell Hook's, concept of capitalist white supremacist patriarchy, which I think we all live in. And another thought was like, it seems very ironical in a way that all these men are actually participating in a system that is stemmed against them and like pits against them in the first place. And it seems that the manosphere in that regard is like a catharsis, like a way to let out those frustrated emotions, but are directed at the wrong culprit, right?
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and that's exactly how I read it.
Yeah, I was going to say just on sort of Simon, what you were saying, completely. Yeah, I agree that idea that there's almost like a doubling down of the American dream as it slips away. And then it seems to sort of exacerbate it even further, of course, because it's even less likely. And that idea that masculinities, I think Steve Garlick talks about technologies of insecurity, how masculinity serves to stabilize these neoliberal ideas like individualized success and hustle culture, which themselves are the cause of that destabilizing sense of masculinity. So it has this like perpetuating fulfilling prophecy almost, and I find that really interesting how masculinity has certain masculinities are sort of used to stabilize and sort of reify neoliberal concepts, which themselves are the cause of these destabilizing masculinities.
Yeah, I was just thinking about an analogy. Diana, I think you were the one who mentioned the need in academia to keep publishing papers. I always think about the manosphere as like an extreme version of academia in some sense, in that in academia is also in crisis, but it is highly individualistically competitive. And the solution in academia is always just produce one more paper, produce one more book, produce one more thing, and then you will get this ideal academic life. But it's not there. It doesn't exist anymore. Like for, even people who I know are tenured professors are extraordinarily stressed and worried about their jobs and their future and their security. So the manosphere is very similar to that. Go to the gym one more time, do this thing, and eventually you'll get this, American dream life. But it doesn't exist anymore. And I think that I don't know, I see it in some ways a lot like academia, and that, and one of the things to identify is that we all get caught into this neoliberalistic framework. I know it because I'm here, being like, please buy my book, because that's the thing you got to do. And I feel really uncomfortable about it and awkward about it. But it's also the thing that you're kind of embedded in all our mindsets as of how you survive in the world and how you get through. And this is just, the manosphere is an extreme version of this.
That is so true. Like we are not, as academics, we're not involuntary celibate, but involuntary voluntary academics. Maybe we can create like an internet space just for that, and be able to really, rant about the productivity, like the obsession for productivity that academia has. Yeah.
Well, hey guys, you made it. You made it all the way through the entire highlight reel. And I want to remind people, that is not all the footage that I have. I have all the footage from today that is just as insane, and people in the chat that were there can attest to this. The footage we saw today was just as insane, in some cases not more insane than what we just watched. And there's even more from the previous days that I have that I didn't put in the highlight reel because I only had so much time to put it together. So, what'd you guys think? Let's do a debrief in the chat. Some of you sat and watched the whole thing. Congratulations if you sat and watched the whole thing. If you sat and watched the whole thing, by the way, and you feel insane, can you just imagine how insane I feel? Because I sat through that shit for 4 straight days. And if you want to show your appreciation, feel free to send a super chat. Feel free to head over to my Substack, Karlyn, Karlyn.substack.com. When you support me with a monthly or annual donation on my Substack, you allow me to go to events like that where I torture myself for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours upon end to give you guys the content and to show you what is going on. And ain't no one else getting you that content. Actually, that's not true. I actually know someone else who infiltrated this conference. It was so funny. I'm not going to say who it is. I'm not going to out this person because I like this person a lot and I'm not going to out them. They will out themselves when they're ready. But like, I was in the middle of recording this conference the other day and I get a DM from one of my friends and they were like, Karlyn, are you doing this spy stream thing with something related to Berkeley? And I was like, well, yeah, there is a center at Berkeley involved. Yeah, there is. And then they were like, I know what you're doing because I'm doing it too. So there is at least one other person that I know of that infiltrated, but I'm not gonna say who it is. They will out themselves in their own time. And when they do, we will share their content because we love them. And that's just the way it's gonna be. But yeah, that was crazy. And I want to thank everyone that sat through Spy Stream for 4 days with me for that, because that was a lot. That was a lot. That was a lot. And all that was real, guys. That is how they see the world. And listen, I do have a lot of thoughts and a lot of debriefing I want to do with you guys over what I learned about how the left is viewing things right now. Now, listen, this is one institute of crazy people. I don't know that they're necessarily indicative of the entire left, but I do think that the themes that they brought up in regards to biological essentialism, in regards to by the way, if you see leftists pushing media literacy, what they mean when they say media literacy is training your children to only watch the media that they approve of. They're talking about, instead of to combat all this right-wing stuff, they're talking about teaching kids media literacy and critical thinking. That's like the coded language that they're using. Now, that doesn't sound like a bad thing to normal people, right? Media literacy and critical thinking. But what they mean is teaching children in school to think like them and only consume the media that they say is okay to consume, and to question everything as long as you only ask certain questions and not other questions. And I have clips relating to that. I mean, they talked about, you guys saw, they talked about education in the schools. But the biological essentialism thing for them was very, very big. What they mean when they say biological essentialism is it's talking about Trump's executive order saying that there are only two genders and they're men and women, which is one of the best things Trump has done to combat the left. By the way, they fucking hate that executive order. And I agree, that executive order is actually very good. Because one of the things these people are trying to do, because there were a lot of queer Marxists in this, is they're trying to abolish the gender binary. The gender binary means men and women. Trump has issued an executive order saying the gender binary is what we have. And so when they're saying gender essentialism, what they mean is this crazy idea that there are only men and women. That's what they mean. So it's trying to abolish the gender binary, and they talk a lot about that at the conference. Anyway. I do hope you guys enjoyed it. I don't really have much left to say right this second. I'm kind of really exhausted, if I'm honest. It's been a really long week. We had a lot of spy streams this week. We do have more spy streams coming up next week. So let me get out the calendar and I can show you guys what spy streams we have coming up. And you can actually access the calendar because now I do have a calendar on my website, which is decodetheleft.com. If you go to decodetheleft.com, and you go to events, you're going to see our events calendar, and that's got the upcoming spy streams listed. So I believe when is this? April 30th. So 26, 27, 20. So like Wednesday. Is that a Wednesday? I don't even know. On April 30th, we are doing a spy stream inside a major university. Yep, that's Wednesday. And they have a trans activism training. That's going to be a great one. I think I'm going to postpone this campus insurrection webinar a couple weeks, but that's okay. May 2nd, we've got this is a K through 12 school district that's talking about equity. We got a couple webinars coming up. On May 9th, we have another spy stream into another major university where they're doing a thing about gender and sexuality. So we do have 3 spy streams right now coming up, and the way you get access to spy stream is by heading over to my Substack, which is Karlyn, KARLYN.substack.com, and signing up as a member for $8 a month, $80 a year. This is how we bring people into our crazy world. And when you become a member of the Substack, you can also fund my work through Locals, Patreon, become a YouTube channel member, become a Twitter subscriber. All of those things will get you an invite to Spy Stream, but it is a supporter exclusive almost always. The reason I do it as a supporter exclusive is first of all, it's just really cool. I'm sorry. You get to watch news be made right in front of you, so it should be a little bit more exclusive. But the real reason I do it, honestly, is I used to actually just publicly broadcast the trainings just on the internet in general, and I ran into a lot of problems. Like the people running the training would find out, they try to cancel it, they would stop the training, they would kick us all out. Like it just was really problematic to do it publicly all the time. I still do it publicly sometimes, but just really it has to be a very specific type of event and circumstances for me to do it, because keeping it to supporters only makes it much more likely that we're actually going to be able to execute on the spy stream. And the purpose of the spy stream is to see what they're saying behind closed doors. That is the purpose to it. Okay, because we need to know what they're talking about. We need to know what they're thinking. We need to know what they're planning. We can get a lot of stuff from them in public, but the best case scenario is getting behind closed doors and seeing what they say to each other when they think people like us are not listening. So that is part of the thing that you're funding when you support my work on Substack. I do a lot of other stuff too. We got a lot of great things coming up. I do take Sundays off from streaming, so I'm not planning on streaming tomorrow. We are going to be doing movie night in the supporter Discord. Does anyone remember what movie I said we would watch with Jennifer? Does anyone remember what movie we're watching tomorrow? I don't remember what I gave Jennifer a movie. It seemed like a great idea. I don't remember what that movie was. But we're probably watching a really cool movie tomorrow night in the supporter Discord. I just don't remember what it is because it's been that type of week. So we will be watching a movie at 8 p.m. in this. What the fuck movie did I tell Jennifer we were going to watch? Hang on. Let me just see. Did I message this to her? Or do we have yes, thank you. The Doors. Thank you. We're watching The Doors. Thank you. We are watching The Doors in honor of Val Kilmer, and it's an amazing. I knew we were watching a good movie. I knew I picked out a good one. And so it's an amazing movie, and we were watching that at 8 p.m. tomorrow in the supporter Discord. And that's all she wrote, and that's all I have for right now. And I really can't. I have nothing else to give, guys. I have nothing else to give. It's exhausting doing this stuff in a way that I can't explain. And not only is it exhausting, you kind of feel like you're on drugs. And maybe I did just smoke a joint while we were watching that. So maybe I am actually on drugs. But, like, I felt like that before, okay? I felt like that before. You get, like, an adrenaline high, but it's also very stressful. And it's also just crazy. Anyway. I'm going to go relax, and I'm going to go just have a nice, relaxing evening. And all of you should as well. And I will see you guys tomorrow in the Discord. If you're a new member on my Substack, I send out a newsletter on Sundays called The Digest. That's how you find the Discord link. There'll be everything else you need to know in that newsletter as well. And you know, we'll see you back on Monday on the channel. We're resuming our main streaming schedule, which is stream Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. We do Socialism Saturdays at 6 p.m. I really hope you guys enjoyed the show. Make sure to share my work with people who would find it interesting. And we're going to take a day off, and then we're going to have a whole big week again next week. All right, guys, that is all I have. See you next time. Bye.
How are you feeling? How long have you been here? 3 months, May 17th. And what brought you? That's difficult to answer. I'm not clear. How is it that playing the piano for people has eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital?
That's difficult to answer.